This happened back when I was a kid in the early 2000s. I remember it like it was yesterday though. So I think I was about 10, and I lived with my parents and two younger sisters at the time. We also lived about 10 minutes away from a huge shopping mall. I went there many times as a kid. One sunny Saturday morning, all five of us went down to the mall. The reason we were going is because my younger sister wanted to see some celebrity that was having a meet and greet or something. I don't remember exactly who it was or what the situation was, but I know that I wasn't really a fan. So when we arrived, the mall was very busy. My mom and sister got in line where all the other girls were waiting. Me, my dad, and younger sister went to walk around the rest of the mall and wait. My dad took us to the center of the mall, which had a large amusement park. We went to the arcade and played some games there for a while. After some time of this, my mom and sister were still in line with the large crowd, and my youngest sister was going to go on some little kids ride. I was hungry, and my dad gave me some money to go and get some food. So I left the area and walked down some crowded hallways. I was looking for the pretzels and walked for probably like 5 minutes away. As I struggled to find the pretzels, I was passing by hundreds of different people. I remember that sometime when I was walking, I felt a tap on my shoulder from behind. I looked back and there was a man standing there, but I didn't know who he was. At first, I was very confused, and I didn't know if he was mistaking me for somebody else. But the man said that he had to talk to me, and he motioned for me to go to the side. I went a little off to the side, away from where everybody was walking and in front of a random store. The man asked me what I was doing walking around the mall by myself. I told him that I was just going to get a pretzel. That's when the man told me that he would buy one for me and asked me to go with him. Now, I knew better than this, and I realized at this point that the man was a total stranger. So I told him no, and instead of continuing to go find the pretzels, I instead started to walk back over to my parents. I remember that at first, the man started to walk after me, which made me pretty nervous, but this didn't last long. I was able to quickly blend in with the large crowd by walking kind of fast. I lost the guy pretty easily. He didn't really seem to chase after me that close, and he gave up. I was able to quickly walk back over to find my parents. My mom and younger sister were still in line, and my dad and youngest sister were on the ride. So I waited for my dad and sister, and then I told them about what happened when the ride was over. Then the three of us went to get pretzels together. I was looking out for the man who had approached me, but I did not see him. Afterwards, we found a table near where my mom and other sister were, and we sat down there. After a while, my mom and sister were finally done. I remember that after that, we all went someplace else, I can't remember. But when we were going to leave, we were approaching the hallway that I had walked down where the guy approached me. The area was much more clear now, and there were multiple police officers, as if something had happened. We all wondered about it, but ended up just walking past it and going away. However, I remember later that day when we got home, my parents said that the police activity was caused by an attempted child abduction. After learning a man was arrested and seeing that it was near where the man had approached me, we figured it to be the same guy. It really creeps me out. But I also feel very lucky that I had just walked away from the guy when he talked to me. I'm also happy that the man was not able to successfully kidnap anybody. A while back, I went shopping at a pretty nice and very large mall. I live only about 10 minutes away, and I had several things that I wanted to get. So I arrived at the mall and began my shopping. I was there for several hours, and everything went fine. I had a good time going in store after store and buying lots of things. When I was almost done with my shopping for the day, I was going down to the first level of the mall. This mall has I think 3 or 4 levels. I was on the escalator and was just sort of looking around when I noticed a man on the first floor staring right at me. He had this sort of creepy grin on his face, and he was actually waving at me. It was not a friendly greeting though, but looked almost sinister. At first, I figured that he was not waving at me, but to someone that was probably behind me or something. And I thought that because I had no idea who he was, and I was sure that I had never seen him before, and I didn't think that he would know who I was either. So I looked behind me, but there was nobody there. He was definitely waving at me. I gave a sort of confused wave back to the guy, and he didn't stop. Soon I made it to the first floor and got off the escalator. When I got off, I glanced over at the man and he was still staring at me. I was really confused, so I walked in another direction to finish shopping. I was wondering why he had been waving at me like that, but I soon forgot about it. I went to a couple of other stores before being done shopping for the night. By now, it was nighttime. I left the mall and went out to my car in the parking garage. When I had arrived at the mall, it had been busy, but now my car and one other were the only cars in that particular area. The other car was parked right next to mine. I unlocked my car and put my bags in the back and then got inside. As soon as I sat down in the driver's seat though, I saw that the man who had been waving at me in the mall was behind the wheel of the car next to me. He was staring right at me with that same creepy smile. I was very freaked out to say the least. I wanted to leave there and get away from him as soon as possible. So I started my car, put it into reverse, and then began backing away. But when I did, he started his car. After I started to drive away, the man left his spot and was leaving as well. At that point, I was instantly worried that he would start following me, and that's exactly what he did. I left the parking structure, took a left, and then merged onto a busier road. He did all those same moves. As I drove down the highway, I didn't know what to do. I knew that I couldn't lead him to my house where I sleep at night. After maybe 5 minutes into the drive with him still behind me, I called my friend Jesse who lives in the area. I told Jesse what was going on and I didn't know what to do. Jesse said that he had an idea and told me to keep driving on the highway, so I did. I just kept going straight, even going past where my exit was. However, minutes later, Jesse called back, saying that he could see us. I was in the right lane, driving pretty slow, so I guess Jesse had left his place and merged onto the highway that we were on. I didn't know what he had planned. However, Jesse soon got in line behind the guy who was following me. Then he started blasting his horn at the guy. This went on for over a minute. At an exit, I kept going straight past it, and the man behind me pulled off, taking it. I was glad to see him gone. I guess Jesse's idea had worked. Then I went back to my place and Jesse went back to his. I'm really grateful that he was able to help out, because I didn't know what I was going to do. Looking back, I still don't know who the guy was or why he followed me and stuff. It was really weird. Last year, I went shopping at a really large mall. It was a weekend, so it was very crowded and tons of other people were there. In some areas, it was hard to even walk through the walkways because it was so crowded. I was there for a few hours and did a decent amount of shopping. However, in the time that I was there, I was pickpocketed. At least, I'm like 90% sure that I was. I would always keep my wallet just inside of my back pocket, which was a terrible habit. Habits are hard to break though, but I obviously don't do that anymore. So anyways, I just know that when I left the mall, I realized that I did not have my wallet anymore. And despite me keeping it in a bad spot, it had never fallen out before when I sat down or anything. After realizing that I didn't have it, I quickly canceled my credit cards. Then I looked everywhere that I could think to look. There was really no use though. Surely somebody would have picked it up. And even if nobody did, it would be like finding a needle in a haystack. I was disappointed, but luckily I didn't have much cash in the wallet and nobody had used my cards yet. I thought that I would never get it back, and so when I was home, I started ordering new credit cards. I also looked into getting a new driver's license. I was pretty disappointed, but what could I do about it now? However, late that night, I got a text from a random number I did not recognize. The text said, "Meet me tomorrow night at 11 p.m. and bring $100 cash to get wallet back." It also had an address which turned out to be a park near the city a ways away. I texted back asking who this was and where they had got my wallet. They didn't respond though. I wasn't sure what I should do. Had they stolen my wallet or found it? I was pretty sure that they had stolen it. I considered getting the police involved, but I figured that I couldn't prove that this person stole it and not just found it. The fact that they wanted me to bring $100 really made me mad though. After thinking about it, I decided that I would go and meet with them at the park. But I told my friend Marty about it, and he agreed to go with me to get my wallet at the park. I didn't know what to expect, but being asked to meet at 11 o'clock at night in a park sure seemed sketchy. I really wanted to get my wallet back though. So the next night we drove to the park and got there at around 11. I had never been to that park before. It was a parking lot off a quiet road surrounded by woods. Then there were a few trails, but it was super dark out now. When I arrived, nobody else was in the parking lot. Marty and I sat in the car waiting. At 11 p.m. sharp, I got another text from the number. It said, "Exit your vehicle and take the left path for a quarter mile." This seemed even more sketchy to me. For some reason though, I got out of the car. I just really wanted my wallet back. I had the $100 cash and Marty stayed in the car. So I began walking down the path to the left. It was literally pitch dark and I could barely see anything. I made it about 100 yards down the trail when I felt my phone vibrating. It was not another text from the number though, but it was a call from Marty. I picked it up. I heard Marty telling me to get back to the car now. Then I heard off in the distance tons of honking coming from a car horn. I also heard a car driving. I turned around and ran back to the parking lot. By the time I got there, I just barely saw an SUV driving off down the quiet road. I saw Marty in the car waving me over, still parked in the same spot. I quickly went back inside the car. Marty explained to me what had happened. He said that when I was a ways down the path, this SUV pulled into the parking lot. He saw at least 3 guys in it, and he claimed that he was sure he saw one of them brandishing a gun. They pulled up and parked a few spaces away. Marty figured that I was in trouble to get jumped, or maybe worse, so he started honking the car horn like crazy. This actually scared them off. I figured they thought Marty was me, and seeing how he was still in the car and making a bunch of noise, they wouldn't be able to rob him. If Marty had not been there, these guys would have ambushed me alone on the dark trail. Now, I know a lot of people will say that I'm stupid. Why would anybody meet a random person alone in a park at 11 p.m. on a random trail in the woods? And you're right, it was stupid, and I deserve all the crap that I get for it. But I was much younger, and I've certainly learned from the experience. At least I had the thought to bring a friend, which ended up saving me. Hopefully this can teach anybody listening to always be prepared in any situation.
Last year, I went to the Mall of America. It's one of the biggest malls in the country, and I was visiting Minnesota from my home state of South Carolina. I was there to visit some family that I have, and the first day that I was there, I had to go check out the giant mall. When I got inside, I first explored some of the stores, and then walked through the amusement park that they have in the center of it. I was having a great time, but I remember right when I was leaving the amusement park going back into the mall area, some guy walked out right behind me. That same guy proceeded to follow me down the giant mall hallway for at least 5 minutes, and then went up the escalator right behind me. Soon, it became obvious that he was following me. He didn't even really try to hide it. I mean, the only reason I was able to notice it so quick was because he was only 10 feet behind me, and when I stopped to look inside a store, he stopped, and then when I kept walking, he did the same. He could have easily walked by me. By now, when I was going up an escalator, I stood kind of sideways on it and then looked behind me to see who this guy was. He was sort of thin and had on a t-shirt and jeans. He also had longer red hair that was up in a bun. I took the next escalator up to the 3rd level of the mall, and so did this guy behind me. When I got to the 3rd level, I left the escalator and walked around to find the food court. After I found it, I sat down. I was hungry and I wanted to get food, but not with this guy right behind me. I sat down at a random table to see what the guy would do. He sat down at the very table next to me. Then I watched him look around as if he wasn't following me. Did this guy seriously think he was being inconspicuous? Because if so, he was failing miserably. After sitting at the table, texting with some family, and browsing my phone for a bit, I decided I had about enough of this guy. I stood up from my table and walked over to his. He didn't look at me at all until I was standing directly in front of him for a good 5 seconds. Then, he looked up with a surprised expression on his face. When he did, I said to the man, "Hey, why are you following me?" The man didn't even try to deny it, or even answer me at all. He just got up and walked away. I was surprised by this odd behavior, but I watched him walk all the way until he was out of sight. At that point, I was glad that he was gone, and then I was able to order some food and eat it in peace. After that, I wandered around a little bit more and bought a few more things at some of the stores, mostly some souvenir type of stuff and a hat. By the time I was done with my shopping and exploring the mall, my legs were tired from all the walking and I completely forgot about the man. I left the mall through a skyway and started walking to the parking garage where my car was. I was going to drive back to my hotel, about 10 minutes away, and the next day go to family's house. I was 1 level too high and had to take the parking garage stairs to get down to the correct one. When I started walking down the stairs and I turned the corner, I saw the man again that had been following me earlier. He was now just standing on the side of the stairs. He looked at me as I passed by, and after I did, he started following me again. I left the stairs for the parking garage and started walking to my car. He remained behind me the entire time. I was much more concerned now that I wasn't inside the mall where there were a bunch of other people. I turned around and said, "Are you following me again?" He didn't say anything back to me. He was just looking at me. Finally, he spoke. "No, my car's over here," he said. I didn't believe this, especially because of the fact that he had been standing in the stairwell until I passed, and then he magically wanted to leave the stairs. I didn't say anything back to the man and walked over to my car. He was following me at a distance of about roughly 40 feet if I had to guess. At last, I found my vehicle. I walked to the side of it, but was careful to only unlock it when I got right up to the door. The man walked to the third car down from mine, but he didn't get inside. He just kind of stood by the door. As soon as I opened my back door to put my shopping bags inside, the man suddenly walked out from the car he was next to and started sprinting towards me. I had no time to get to my driver's seat because the man was running so fast, plus it caught me off guard. Instead, I jumped into the back seat of my car and scrambled to press the lock button on my keys over and over. I heard the little horn honk, signaling that my car was now locked. The man arrived at my car maybe 3 seconds after that. I was now in the back seat, and the guy tried opening the door. He was looking right inside the car at me, just a couple of feet away, and the only thing separating us was the window. The fact that we were in a parking garage with nobody else currently in sight made matters worse. I crawled over to my front seat to get in the driver's seat and start my engine. I heard the guy say from outside the car, "You're not going anywhere." He moved to the front of the car as I did, and when he saw me putting the keys in the ignition, he then moved to behind my car, I guess to block me in. There were other cars parked on both sides of me, and in front of me was a concrete barrier, so backing out was my only option. The man stood there just staring into my back window. After a few seconds, he said, "Get out of the car." I wasn't sure what to do, but I knew that I wasn't getting out. The guy kept standing there, and I was afraid he would try smashing the windows or something. I began honking the horn of my car. I kept pressing the horn repeatedly and holding it for several seconds as well. I was hoping to draw some attention to myself so that anybody in the area might notice what was going on. After I was honking for maybe 20 seconds straight, the guy actually walked away. As soon as he did, I backed out and left. When I was driving away, I was a little concerned that the guy would get into his car and follow me, but I don't even think he parked near me. I was able to make it back to my hotel safely. I don't understand though how the guy seemingly knew where I had parked, because he was just standing in the stairwell almost waiting for me. Maybe it was just a coincidence, but when I told my family about the experience, they said they were sorry it happened and ended up going back to the mall with me. That time, thankfully, none of us were followed.
I don't go shopping at malls or things like that very often, but when I do, I tend to buy a lot of things. Clothes, electronics, whatever. There's a decent-sized mall that's maybe 10 minutes away from where I live, and I go there occasionally. The mall has quite a few popular stores, and just about anything you could want to buy. I went there one weekend, and only had a couple of things that I wanted to get for sure. I was open to buying other things, though. As the day went on, I ended up finding quite a few things. I basically shopped all day, and by the time I was done, my arms were full with bags. I stayed at the mall until some of the stores were closing, and then I decided to finally call it a day. I walked back to my car, which I had parked at the top level of the parking garage attached to the mall. When I got inside of the parking garage, things were significantly less busy. There were far less cars, and when I got to the top level where I had parked, I didn't see any other cars at all. In fact, it appeared that my car was the only one parked there. I walked over to it, but when I got within maybe 75 feet, I heard a noise. The car was sort of around a corner, and the noises were coming from out of my view. I kept walking, and when I was maybe 50 feet away, whoever had been making those noises came into view. I saw about 4 or 5 people come around the corner. They walked sort of in front of my car, blocking it. One of the men started walking towards me at that point, and I had a terrible feeling. I knew there were no other cars parked up here, so the men were probably up to no good. Plus, most of them wore dark clothing and sweatshirts with the hoods up. Some of them, I could barely see their face. It was like they were trying to conceal their identities. One of the men held something in his hand, and I couldn't quite tell what it was. With all of my bags in my hands, I turned around and immediately started sprinting for the mall. I ran as fast as I possibly could. One of the men shouted something at me, but I'm not sure what it was because there was a bad echo in there. I don't think they chased me, but I didn't look back to check. I was able to make it back inside the mall
and when I did, I kept walking quickly inside of it. I looked back several times, but I didn't see any of the men. I don't think they followed me into the mall. When I made it back towards the center of the mall, I finally felt safe. There were a few people here and there, although most of the stores inside were closed. I waited there until there was basically nobody else left. Then I decided that I would try to go to my car once more. I made it there, and luckily this time, the men were gone. I still left as quickly as possible. Looking back at that day, I'm sure that they were going to try to rob me for all that I had bought. Probably my money too. I reported the incident on the mall website, but haven't heard back.
I'd been working maintenance at a mall in Indiana for over a decade. I knew every spot, every floorboard, every flickering light, and every stubborn leak that popped up in that old place. It wasn't even a good job, but I liked how easy and simple it was. One time, something really weird happened though. It started on a normal day at work. The mall had been having some plumbing issues down in the basement level, and I was called in to take a look. The air smelled faintly of mold and old cleaning supplies. I found the pipe that needed fixing and was tightening a bolt when I noticed something strange. A cold breeze of air seemed to be coming from behind a cracked section of the drywall. When I first felt it, it gave a very uncomfortable feeling. I shouldn't feel air 20 feet underground in the middle of the mall. I set my stuff down because, like I said, the draft didn't make sense. I ran my hand along the wall and felt it again. The cold air was seemingly seeping through a couple of cracks. My curiosity got the better of me, and I grabbed a crowbar from my kit and started hitting the drywall. I wasn't really thinking about the damage or the possibility of having to pay for it later, but I didn't care. This was a weird situation. What was revealed was something I didn't expect, an old wooden door that was crumbling and hadn't seemed to be touched in years. I was excited, which was probably wrong since I had just destroyed the wall, but I had never had something like this pop up at work before. I'd been working there for so long that I never imagined anything like this could be down there. I thought about leaving the door alone, but then I decided, you know what, forget this, I'm going for it. I twisted the door handle. It wasn't locked, and it swung open with a loud creak because of how old it was. I pointed my flashlight and swept it back and forth to see what I could find. It just looked like an old storage room. Dust, cobwebs, and the air here even thicker with a scent of mold. There were mannequins standing there, which was strange because mannequins could only be in the clothing department, which I didn't work in. There were also old registers, stacks of boxes, and supplies. Still, something didn't feel right. This wasn't a storage room that I was aware of anybody using. It must have been really old. I stepped inside and flashed my light around some more to see if I could figure out what exactly it was used for. The boxes weren't filled with old merchandise or anything. They were filled with personal items like wallets, watches, and jewelry. There was even car keys, one which was attached to a small tag with a date written on it, faded in black ink. The oldest date was from 15 years ago. These didn't seem like just lost items. They looked like personal belongings, things people carry with them every day. I picked up a dusty wallet and flipped through it. Inside it was a driver's license belonging to a young woman named, well, I'm not going to say her real name because I don't want to dox her, but her name was Heather. The date on the tag attached to the wallet was from 12 years ago. Then I heard a voice from a ways away. One of my coworkers yelled, "Hey, are you down here?" It startled me so much. I had forgotten I was still at work. It was Dave, one of the other maintenance guys, coming to check on me. My hands were so dusty that I ended up dropping the wallet. Dave asked what it was. I went over to him and tried to explain what I had found, showing him the door and the box and the tags. He just laughed and brushed it off as probably an old storage room. But I didn't even want to think that. I had been working there so long and I had never seen anything like it. I spent a long time trying to research what it could possibly be after that. However, I didn't really find much information. I took what I found to mall security, but they didn't really seem to care much, probably because they weren't real police. Eventually, in my research though, and from talking to people around the mall, I found out that there was this old security guard who used to work there. Apparently, he had been fired for stealing from one of the stores. He was also rumored to steal from mall shoppers. My theory is that he's the one behind the stuff that I found. He would have access to the secret room with keys probably, and he may have been stealing from shoppers, whether they left a purse on a bench or maybe he just straight up took stuff. I really don't know, but I notified the local police, and they said they would look into it. Since then though, I haven't really heard anything. I quit the job not too long after that, and it's been a few years now. I used to work for this company where I would travel sometimes. Several times a year, some of the people from my office would go to conferences in different cities around the US. I've moved to another company last year, and this story takes place in 2019. One trip in particular, we flew out on a Thursday afternoon for a Friday conference in the city. We were flying back on Sunday morning, and it was me and about 10 other coworkers. The hotel we got was pretty nice, and we were very close to the airport and city as well. But the hotel also happened to be attached to a giant shopping mall. After the work stuff on Friday night, several coworkers and I went into this large mall and explored. It was very interesting with lots of stuff. After walking around for a while, we got dinner at a nice restaurant there, and then we went to a bar that was actually in the mall as well. My coworkers and I stayed there for a while, but I wasn't that much of a drinker and I decided to walk back. Plus, I wanted to do a little shopping in the mall. I'm not sure exactly what time it was then, but it seemed like most of the stores in the mall started to be closing around then. I went to a few places, but then decided to walk back to the hotel, and then I could shop the next morning because we didn't have anything going on. But then when I was going back, something strange happened. The hotel was on the complete other side of the mall, and it took me a while to get there. As I was walking, the mall was very quiet. When I was about halfway back, I passed by this guy that appeared to just be standing around. He was wearing a black sweatshirt and jeans and was bald. Right when I walked past, he started to walk behind me. I noticed it right away. I didn't think much of it at first until I kept walking and he stayed behind me for several minutes. He was a little ways back, so not directly behind me or anything, but there wasn't really anybody else around, so I could still easily notice. As I kept going and turned a few more corners, the man remained there. I was starting to wonder what he was doing and if he was intentionally following me. Eventually though, I got really close to the hotel. The guy was still trailing me even when I got to the hotel doors and walked inside. After getting in, I quickly walked over to the elevator to get to my room. You needed a key card to use the elevator. I got inside the elevator and was starting to use it, and at that point, I remember seeing the man enter the hotel out of the corner of my eye. You could just barely see the entrance from the elevator, and it was sort of around a corner. The man walked right past the front desk, and I could hear him coming my way. That's when the door finally started to close. The man had made it within probably 20 feet of the elevator door before it closed completely. I'm pretty sure that I let out a big sigh of relief, and then I went up to my floor and over to my room. It was possible that the man was also staying in the hotel, but something about him seemed very suspicious. Well, later on that night, as I was in my hotel room, I texted a coworker about my experience. She had been at the bar inside the mall with the other coworkers, and they had just recently gotten back. She told me that when they got back to the hotel, she noticed the man that I was talking about just sitting in the lobby. This made me even more suspicious of the guy. I didn't think that he was staying there. So the next day, my coworkers and I were going to the nearby large city. Before that, in the morning, I went out to the mall again to do some more shopping. This was not long after the mall opened, so at first it was not that busy, but it quickly got busier and busier. When I had been at the mall for maybe an hour though, I noticed the same man again. When I was leaving a store, I saw him standing around outside of it. I turned and walked one way and then looked behind me, and I noticed him also walking that way. I was really surprised to see him again and also worried now. I didn't know who he was or why he was seemingly following me. The good thing about this situation was that the mall was significantly busier now than it had been the previous night. I walked fast and made a few moves through the crowd. Soon I stopped seeing the man behind me and thought that I had lost him. However, just about 30 minutes after that, I saw him again. I did a similar thing of walking very quickly through a crowd, and I seemed to lose him again. Well, fast forward to another 30 minutes to an hour after that. I remember that I walked past one of the exits and I saw several police officers. Then I saw the man standing near them, like they were all talking to him. I stayed in the area and watched to see what would happen. The police officers ended up leaving the mall with the guy. I'm guessing that he either got kicked out or arrested. I'm not sure why exactly, but based on his behavior of following me around, he seemed to be up to no good. I didn't see him for the rest of my time in that city. That was a crazy experience at the mall, and looking back, I'm really glad that I got away from him that Friday night. I'm not sure what would have happened if he had made it to the elevator. I went to this really large mall with my friend Macy one time. We were shopping together like we often do. This mall is one of my favorites of all time and was very crowded with lots of other people on the day that we went. I'm not sure how many stores are in this mall, but I wouldn't be surprised if it was like 500. As Macy and I shopped around, we noticed seeing a few of the same people multiple times. You know how it is when you're shopping and you might see a guy walking near you and then you cross paths a while later. Nobody really stood out for one reason or anything though. I mention this to you now for context for the rest of the story. So we shopped for several hours, maybe 3 or 4. It was a good solid day of shopping. After that we left and hung out some more at my place. Macy eventually left and went back to her apartment. I was alone in my place late that night when I went on Snapchat. This random woman had added me there. I'm used to being added by random people. It doesn't happen that much anymore, but still here and there. It's usually guys who add me though, and not women. I was curious who she was, so I added her back. When I did, I saw that she had posted a story, and I watched it. There was not just one Snapchat story that she posted though. There was like 10 or 15. I realized that she had been at the mall earlier. In the first picture, she was taking a selfie in front of the large open area in the mall. Upon seeing her, I realized that I remembered noticing her in the mall. I had seen her about maybe twice, but thought nothing of it. She didn't seem to be doing anything weird when I saw her in the mall and was just one of the people that I had seen passing by. But I didn't know her or recognize her other than that at all. The woman had dark hair that was slicked back. She was also wearing dark sunglasses and a tracksuit. She looked almost mysterious. In the selfie that she took, I noticed that Macy and I were in the background. I had no idea that the picture had even been taken. We were not looking at it or anything. I moved on to her next story. It was a picture of a fountain at the mall with the location filter showing the mall she was at. It was not a selfie, but a photo that she took. In the picture, among the people walking by the fountain, I noticed me and Macy again. Now this was really weird. I looked at the next story. This time the woman was posing for a photo, meaning someone else took it for her. It was in the food court, and in the background was me and Macy again. Except you could only see our backs because we were facing away, and I had no clue that the picture had ever been taken. I moved on to the next picture, which was in a random hallway in the mall. The woman was walking directly behind Macy and I. I moved on again to another selfie with us in the background. The more I saw, the more my jaw dropped. I was getting really creeped out. There were a few photos that I did not see us in, but we were in like 10 of them, and I had no clue that any of them had been taken at all. Then I got a Snapchat from Macy. I opened it and she told me that some lady added her on Snapchat and had posted a bunch of pictures of us. She had added Macy as well. I told her that she added me too, and I had also seen the pictures. We then FaceTimed and talked about how crazy it was for like an hour. It made me feel better to know that I wasn't alone in this strange situation. So after talking, we decided to ask the lady what the deal was. I sent her a chat saying that I noticed me and my friend were in the background of a lot of her pictures. I asked her why she did that and why she had added us. I got no response, but was immediately blocked. She blocked Macy too. This was so confusing. We never heard from her again. I'm still left with many questions. Who was this woman? Why did she do that? And how did she know who we were? I mean, how did she find Macy and my Snapchat accounts? How would she even know our names? It was a really strange experience. This happened 2 years ago now. I went shopping at a very large mall that's fairly close to where I live. I had been there many times before and was mostly familiar with it. It was a weekend when I was there, and there were countless other people. I parked in a parking garage and then was inside the mall shopping for several hours. I got quite a few different things. So after I was finally done shopping, I started to head out of the mall. By this time, it was probably about 4 or 5 p.m. Things were much quieter now, but still a decent amount of other people were there. I left the mall to go back to my car in the parking garage. I remember that I had parked on like the 4th level. When I arrived at my vehicle, which was parked up against one end, there were not as many cars around as before, but I noticed something on my vehicle that seemed strange. I walked closer and I realized that there were multiple photographs taped to my car. Some were on the windshield and others were on the side windows. In total, there was probably 10 photographs. I was very confused at first and had no idea who would have done this. Then I actually looked at the pictures. Most of them were of me, and they were taken that same day as I shopped in the mall. Many of the pictures appeared to be taken at a distance, and some of them were zoomed in a decent amount. One of them was taken just feet away from me, and the person had clearly been walking directly behind me. It sent a shiver down my spine. I took all the pictures off of my car, then looked around the parking garage. All of a sudden, I was paranoid that I was being watched. I didn't notice anybody, but there were many possible hiding places. Then I got inside my car and locked the doors. I started looking at the pictures again. This was extremely creepy. I thought back to my time in the mall and tried to remember seeing anything strange. I really couldn't though. There were so many people there. It would have probably been pretty easy to take pictures of people without them knowing. I really had no idea who had done this or why, but I decided to just leave. As I drove out of the parking garage, there were not too many other cars driving around, but there were some coming and going. When I was descending down to get to the ground level, a car showed up behind me. After leaving the parking garage, I drove down this road near the mall. Then I got onto a ramp to go onto the highway. The only reason I noticed the car behind me doing the same thing was because it was following really close. And that's when I got suspicious that maybe it was the person who had been taking the photos. Of course, I also thought that maybe I was just being really paranoid. By now, there were lots of other cars on the road because this was a major highway. Still, I kept an eye on it. The car behind me was a kind of SUV, and it maintained a close distance. I continued with the drive for a while, which was to go on this highway for about 10 minutes. Then I would get off on an exit close to the city that I lived in. On the highway, nothing changed, but there was nothing too crazy about that. When I took the exit off the highway though, the car behind me also did. That's when I got really nervous. They had to be following me. So it seemed like someone, for some reason, was stalking me. I looked in my mirror, but could not really tell who was driving. I didn't have a good enough view. So now that I was off the highway, I was less than 5 minutes from my house, but I knew I couldn't go there. That's when I decided to drive to the police station. I wasn't sure off the top of my head where the nearest one was, so I put in the maps on my phone to get directions. The station wasn't too far away, so I followed the directions there. The car behind me followed as well, all the way up until the street before the police station. Then it stopped. I drove there, parked, and then went inside with all the pictures and reported everything that happened. I gave a description of the car, but I didn't get the license plate and couldn't tell the exact model of the car. I felt stupid for not taking better notes of those things. There was not a whole lot that could be done. After that, I went home. I was paranoid for the next few days, thinking this person somehow knew where I lived, but I was not bothered again. I even went back to that mall a couple of weeks later, and nothing happened. To this day, I don't know how to explain it. Maybe it was somebody's idea of an elaborate joke. I just hope that nothing like this ever happens again.
I'm a female, and I work at a clothing store at a mall, and this is something that happened over the summer. I started work at 12 p.m. and was working a closing shift. The mall is open until 9 p.m., but our store closed at 8 on that particular day. It was a Saturday, so the mall was really busy. We got a lot of customers throughout the store, and I was busy basically the whole time. When things started to get interesting, though, was at about 4 p.m. I remember that I was working at one of the 4 registers that we had, ringing up customers. A woman who I was helping told me that she wanted to let me know that there was a guy in the store that was acting creepy and suspicious. I told the woman thanks for letting us know, and when I was done helping her, I notified another employee. I wasn't quite sure what she meant by creepy and suspicious, but I knew that it wasn't good. And the description of the man was a white male with a green sweatshirt and jeans about average height. I glanced around the store, but I couldn't see all areas from where I was, plus the many racks and displays of clothing that we had everywhere didn't allow me to see all the customers, and I didn't see the man. Not even 5 minutes later, though, I got another complaint. Another woman said that a guy in a green sweatshirt seemed to be following her around the store. When I was done helping her, I decided to go find this guy and ask him what he was doing. I left the counter and started walking around the store. Eventually, I saw him near the back corner. He made eye contact with me for a brief second before looking away. As soon as he saw me walking towards him, he turned around and started walking towards the exit. Then he left. I figured he must have gotten the message without me having to say anything, and he knew he was doing something wrong and was going to get kicked out. I was glad he was gone, so hopefully no more of our customers would be bothered. And for the rest of my shift, everything went great. Things quieted down significantly after 7 p.m., and it was very calm for the final hour of work before getting off. There were 3 of us employees working, and at 8 o'clock the other 2 went home, and I stayed back to do a few things. We closed the store by sliding the metal barrier from both sides of the store opening. My last job of the day was to go around the store and make sure that everything was relatively in order. It would usually only take me about 10 or 15 minutes or so. I would go around, sweep the floor, pick up garbage, and if any items were out of place or looking sloppy, I would fix them. Things were taking a bit longer because it had been a Saturday, so there were more things messed up than usual. I started in the front and then made my way to the back. When I was almost done, and at the very back of the store, I was looking through one of the clothing racks, and for some reason, I looked across to the other end. I was looking at the other back corner of the store, and then I noticed something. There was a man hiding behind a clothing display inside another rack of clothes, sort of looking out. I could just barely tell that he was wearing green. I realized that it was the same guy that had been here before in that moment. Thankfully, he wasn't looking at me. My heart started racing, but I tried my best to act normal. That corner of the store that he was in was the only section of the store that I hadn't yet cleaned or organized, and I was going to do it next. I sure wasn't going to do it anymore, though. After I finished organizing the rack of clothes that I casually walked over to the front end of the store. When I got there, I stopped and texted the mall security number. I hoped that they would have a quick response. I felt like I shouldn't leave the store because I was the only employee there, but I really wanted to. I stayed right by the front, about as far away as I could get from the guy. Soon, though, I heard a noise coming from the back of the store. As soon as I did, I ran to the gate and opened it, sliding it open just enough for me to get out, and then pushing it shut behind me. When I did, I just barely saw the man coming into view. I walked to the business next door and saw a security guard walking towards me from down the hallway. I waved him over, and in that same time, saw out of the corner of my eye behind me the man leaving the store that I worked at. I pointed at him, and basically the security guard had to chase the guy down. He did end up getting caught, and I had to make a report. I was just happy to be okay, though. Looking back at that, I'm so glad I saw the man when I did, because it's really creepy to think how he was hiding in the store alone with me as I was working.
I live not too far away from a very large mall. It's nice because I can do almost all my shopping there. Really anything aside from basic stuff and groceries I will get at the mall. I remember that one time last year I went there sometime in the late afternoon. I went around and did a good amount of shopping. The mall was pretty busy, but it usually is. There's always tons of other people there doing stuff. So it was probably sometime at night when I left, and it was dark out. The mall was much quieter now than it had been several hours earlier when I had arrived. There was a large parking garage connected to the mall, and there's other parking outside of that as well. I had parked in the parking ramp at I believe the 3rd level that day. So I walked out, and when I was approaching my car, I remember seeing a young woman in crutches heading in my direction. She called out to me saying hi, and I turned around and I said hi back to her. I did not recognize her and didn't know why she was greeting me. The woman slowly made her way closer to me in crutches. As I was about to get into my car, she asked me if I wouldn't mind driving her to her car. She said that she had parked on another level but mistakenly thought she parked on that floor. It was difficult for her to move around with the crutches and just wanted me to help her find her car. She didn't seem sketchy and I felt compelled to help her. If I said no, I would have felt like a big jerk. So I told the woman to hop in. She put her crutches in the back seat of my car as I put my bags in. Then I got into the driver's seat and the woman got into the front passenger seat. I asked her if she remembered the level that her car was on, and she said no, but she thought that it was lower. She said that she had never been to the mall before and was from a small town or something, so she wasn't used to large parking lots. At first, she was pretty nice and friendly. I continued to drive around slowly and then went down a level. We drove all around the 2nd level to the parking structure, and the woman didn't really say anything. After I went up and down every single aisle, I asked the woman if it looked familiar, and she said no. So then I went down to the ground level. After driving around there for at least 5 minutes, she still couldn't find her car. I was surprised because to me it seemed impossible to lose a car that bad. You would think that she would know at least the general area that it was in, and there were not that many other cars around with it being late, so it was easier to see all the ones that were there. Eventually, the woman told me that she thought she actually parked outside of the parking garage and just nearby it. That's when I thought it seemed really weird. How could she think that she was in the parking garage when she actually wasn't? I didn't say anything though and just kept driving. So we left the parking structure, and then she seemed to magically remember. She told me to drive around the corner and to the right. There was a smaller, sort of secluded parking lot there. It was between some trees and the parking structure. Mostly, it was used as overflow parking if the mall was super busy. I drove over there and it was not very well lit. There, sitting alone, was a black 4-door sedan that looked to be about 20 years old. It was parked in the far corner next to a tree and was the only car in this particular parking lot. The woman said that that was her car and that I could just drive up and park right next to it. She said thanks for driving her around. I was relieved that she found it, but I was also very confused. I was thinking, how could she forget that she parked out here? But I was just glad to finally be on my way after I would drop her off. I parked next to her car, and the woman opened up the door and then got out. She went to the back door and opened it up to get her crutches out of my back seat. Just as she was grabbing them though, I suddenly heard footsteps from behind the car sort of. I saw movement in my mirror, but it was really dark and it happened fast, so I didn't know what was going on. The next thing I knew, someone was opening the back door to my driver's side of the car as well. I knew this was a problem, and my reaction was to hit the gas pedal. I was parked up against a curb with some grass and trees out front and not much space. I turned the wheel and accelerated. My car shot up the curb and briefly into the grass. I immediately went to the left and away from the guy who tried to open the door, and the woman as well. I barely saw that a guy was hanging onto my door, sort of trying to stop me or else get into the car. He ran with me for a while, and after I made it off the curb from turning, I was back into the parking lot and I was able to go much faster. The guy had to let go and I was able to drive away from him. I went pretty fast until I was a good distance away. The parking lot did not have an exit on the way that I had driven to though, so I had to go back. I turned my car around and saw the man running towards me. I also saw the woman jogging behind him, and she was not using crutches at all. Her injury had been fake. She set me up. I hit the gas again and quickly drove for the exit and was able to make it out before they reached me. I heard them yelling and cursing as I drove away. Right after I made it out of there, I called the cops and told them about what happened. I'm 90% sure that they got out of there though before the cops arrived. Looking back, I'm just happy that I made it out of there safely. I'm not giving any random strangers a ride again.
I'm a female employee of a small shop in a decent-sized mall near where I live. Our store is so small that we only have one employee working at once generally. We're an actual store though, not one of those stands that are in the middle of the walkways. We sell mostly accessories and some shoes as well. So one day I was working and by myself like any other. It was sometime in the afternoon and the mall was pretty busy like usual. However, even when the mall was busy, we usually don't get too many customers. I was the only person in the store, and we hadn't had anybody come in a while. At one point, a man walked inside the store. He casually made his way closer to where I was at the very back center behind the counter. Now, to describe the man, I would say that he was fairly short and thin. He wore a gray shirt and black pants, but they didn't seem to fit him well. He had a pretty bad haircut, to be honest, that was also rather messy. And as he got close to me, I could smell smoke and cigarettes. The man basically tried to pick me up. His method was pretty creepy though. He told me how he had been watching me today and he thought that I was beautiful. I couldn't get past the part where he said he'd been watching me. I don't remember the rest of what he said, but it wasn't much better. I was friendly to the guy until he suggested I leave right then and there and go with him. When I said no, he asked about when I got done, and I declined his offer in the nicest way I could. The man left after that, walking out of the store and going to the right. I thought that was that, only to see the guy reappear about 20 minutes later. He walked by and slowed down significantly to look inside right at me. I ignored this. The guy didn't wave or anything and just walked past. He came back less than an hour after that and pretty much did the same thing, but was farther away. I guess he really had been watching me. It was making me sort of uncomfortable, but as long as he didn't come in the store again, it shouldn't be too much of a problem. There were only a few more customers in the rest of my shift for that day. I tried to ignore what was going on outside, like if the man was walking by or watching me. Things went pretty smoothly for the most part. I ended up getting off of work several hours later. I left the store and started walking down the hallway to the parking garage where I always parked at. It was in the west side of the mall, and it took me maybe 10 minutes to walk there. By this time, the mall was still pretty busy, and there were people all over the place. As I was walking, I made it no more than 100 feet before glancing behind me and seeing the same man again. It was a terrible feeling, knowing that he was still there and he most likely saw me. I kept walking towards the exits, checking back every so often, and each time that I did, not only was the man still following me, but he was slightly closer than before. There was still a number of people between us, but this guy was going to catch up with me eventually. What he planned on doing when he did, I had no idea. I decided to turn at a spot I didn't normally to try and throw the man off. He kept following me there. The thought occurred to me that I could find a mall security guard and tell them about the situation. The only problem was that it was hard to predict where in the mall the security guards would be. We had a decent number of them, but as busy as our mall got, many of them might not be available at once. I walked around trying to find somebody, with the man still trailing me a ways back. This went on for several minutes with no luck. I went down probably 3 or 4 different walkways and saw hundreds of people, but none of them were a security guard. I decided then to just leave. There were so many people that I had to be able to lose the man if I tried hard enough. I began walking faster and more erratic. I got some strange looks from people as I did, but I didn't even care. I went in one of the bigger stores that had a lot of customers in it and saw the man enter not long after me. I went up and down a few aisles of the store and then quickly walked out. Once I was out, I turned a corner extremely fast and then didn't notice the man after me. I had finally lost him. Still, I walked a ways further just to be safe. When I was sure that I had lost him, I finally started going out to my car. I made my way through the rest of the mall, which took a while because I was on the complete other side now. I was very careful and checked for the man over and over. I didn't see him at all though. At last, I had made it out into the parking garage. As I was walking to my car, suddenly I saw the guy again. He was a pretty far ways away and wasn't looking at me. I quickly walked into the opposite direction, which is where my car was. I walked as fast as I could and finally made it to my vehicle. I wasted no time and got in, started the engine, and drove off. Luckily, I wasn't followed by the guy. I was able to make it home safely. I had the next few days off, and when I worked again, I didn't notice him at all. I haven't seen him since, and I'm hoping that I don't. When I saw the man in the parking garage, I actually think that it was a coincidence. He didn't seem to notice me, and he wasn't by my car either. Still, I will never forget the creepy feeling when I saw him there.
I worked at a mall as a custodian years ago. I would describe it as a pretty average mall, but it was kind of small as well. Most of the time, I would work there after the mall closed doing various tasks, mostly cleaning and maintenance type of stuff. I would work really late at night and would get off at around midnight or so usually. Because the mall was kind of small, I was typically the only one working after close. The mall closed at 8 p.m. and one night after that I was working like normal. Sometimes it would feel a little spooky when it got really late at night. Being by myself in an entire mall was weird because it would get really quiet. So a few hours after close, at maybe 10 p.m., I remember that I heard what sounded like footsteps. They were not within my sight, and I could not confirm exactly what the sound was. However, nobody was supposed to be in the mall anymore at all, so therefore I should not be hearing anything. It made me wonder if somebody else was in there. I continued listening and heard the sound again a short time later. It definitely sounded like somebody was walking in a nearby hallway. I thought that maybe an employee who worked in one of the stores was just leaving. Occasionally, employees in stores would stay late. Never had I noticed anybody staying 2 hours late, though. So I just stayed where I was and continued working, assuming that if that was the case, they would just leave. Like 5 minutes later, I heard another sound. This was not somebody walking, though. I heard someone calling out, saying, "Hey." It sounded like a man. I yelled, asking who was there. He told me to come here. I started walking over to where the sound was coming from. I went to the end of the hallway that I was in and turned and went into another one. When I made it into that hallway, I did not see anybody there. I called out asking where they were, but nobody answered. Then I just walked around trying to figure out where this guy was. I heard him yell again for me to get there now, but I realized then that he had moved. His voice was definitely not coming from where it had been before. I didn't know what was going on or who he even was, but I kept going to try to find him. The way he was yelling made it seem like he might need help. But now he was seemingly running away from me as he was yelling, and this seemed suspicious. He called out again, now even farther away. I yelled, asking what was going on. By now I was frustrated and also creeped out. I walked around and the voice stopped altogether. Like I said, the mall was not that large. There's still a decent amount of hallways and places to go, but I eventually looked in all of them. The stores were all closed by now, obviously, so there was limited places for this guy to go. After searching pretty much the entire mall without finding the guy, I went back to work. I figured that he left, and maybe he was just some guy pulling a prank. I went around and made sure that all the doors were locked, which they were. Then I finished my work for the night. In the rest of the time that I was working, I was nervous and always looking over my shoulder, but I also didn't hear anything more, and I didn't see anything suspicious either. Really late that night, I left and went home. The next morning, I got a call from my boss. He told me that one of the doors to the mall had been propped open when he got there in the morning. Apparently, there was a rock propping open one of the doors. Thankfully, nobody was in the mall when he got there. I told him what happened with the noises I heard and stuff. Apparently, the guy must have never left. I really don't know where he had been hiding. When my boss heard this, he contacted the police and reported it. The mall got searched again, but nobody was found. I'm guessing that some guy hid in the mall after close, and then for some reason decided to yell at me. I still don't know what to make of it. He must have still been there the rest of the time that I worked, and then after I left to go home, he must have snuck out and left. Why he left the rock propping the door open, I'm not sure. Maybe he planned to come back. I still don't really know what to make of it, but being in that situation was one of the scariest moments of my life. I have a really bizarre story to tell. It happened a few months back. So there was this wedding coming up that I was going to with my wife. We were guests, and I had to go to a tailor for my suit. Obviously, I had no idea what tailor I was supposed to go to, but I remembered my wife told me that she knew of one that her family had been going to for years. That was fine with me, so the next evening after work, I stopped by. Now, on this day, I worked particularly late, which is something that occasionally happens. It was like 8 p.m. and dark outside. I put in the address to the tailor and followed it. When I arrived, I was in the parking lot of this old run-down looking mall. There were hardly any other cars in the entire parking lot. At first, I thought that this had to be a mistake. Then I looked on the map again, and it showed that the tailor was inside of the mall. I was already thinking of how I was going to tease my wife for having me stop at this abandoned-looking mall. It said they were open though, so I got out of my car and walked inside. When I first got in the mall, it was a very strange feeling because the place was literally 90% abandoned. There were hardly any lights on, and there were countless closed-up stores. Most of them were completely empty, but a few still had their signs up and some things inside. As you could guess, there was not a single other person in sight. I was even wondering myself if I was supposed to be in here. So I started walking the hallways looking for the tailor shop. As I was walking, I remember I passed by this one store. It looked to be a clothing store, at least that's what it used to be. It was closed, and it looked like it had only been closed for maybe the past year. I could see that there was still some merchandise inside, but it was messy and stuff. But I also noticed that the door to the store was propped open. I figured maybe they were in the process of clearing it out or something. But as I was looking and passing it by, I saw somebody was actually inside of the store. It was a man who was wearing jeans and a hooded sweatshirt. I remember that he was passing by the giant window, and then he looked over and he saw me. Then, after looking in my direction, he quickly turned and literally ran out of my view. I was now thinking that he was not supposed to be in there or something. What he was doing, I didn't know. I didn't really care either. I kept walking and I just ignored it. I turned and went down another hallway that was mostly abandoned as well. But finally, at the end of this, there was one sign lit up and in working order that said tailor. So I walked to the end and entered the store. It was in fact open and in business. I honestly couldn't believe it. So I went inside and I got my measurements and stuff and was in the store for maybe 10 to 15 minutes. Then I left and it was time to walk back through the quiet mall to leave. I went down the first hallway and then I turned into the next one. Now I was in the main first hallway that led out to the parking lot. I remember as I was passing by one of the clothing stores again, I saw that the door was still propped open, and the guy who I had seen before was still there. This time, he was looking right at me from the other side of the window. I thought that it was weird how he was just staring at me, but I ignored it and I passed him by. Then, right after I had passed the store, I heard the door opening and then footsteps. I didn't look back, but as I kept going, I heard the footsteps walking in my direction behind me. For some reason, this guy was now leaving the store and walking behind me. Was he following me? I didn't know. He did not say anything, and neither did I. I kept walking, and I soon reached the exit doors. The man was walking probably about 30 or 40 feet behind me. When I was going through the doors, it sounded like the man behind me was starting to speed up. After I got outside, I looked behind just for a second, and I saw the man fling the doors open at a fast speed. Right after seeing that, I just started sprinting from my car. When I started to run, I heard the man behind me starting to run as well. I went as fast as I could, and luckily, I have decent speed. When I reached my car, I stopped, got out the keys as fast as possible, and hit unlock over and over. Then I grabbed the door, opened it, got inside, and slammed it shut. After I had locked the door, the man reached it probably 2 or 3 seconds later. When he reached my door and tried to open it, I was starting my engine. He punched at the window twice before I was able to drive off. Luckily, it didn't break. I left and then called the cops when I got on the road. I reported what happened and was honestly very confused myself as to what had even took place. I went home and told my wife all about the event. Looking back, I really don't know why that man went after me. I'm guessing he was trying to rob me and was maybe trying to steal from the abandoned store as well. Since this happened, I joked with my wife for a long time how she sent me to an abandoned mall to get robbed. I did return to the mall to go to the tailor again, but I went much earlier in the day and was fine. But this remains one of the scariest moments of my life. I worked at a store in a mall for about a year. This was a long time ago now, but I will never forget one crazy incident that happened. So I was working by myself to close one night. Usually there would be at least 2 of us working at once. It was a clothing store that sold some accessories and things like that as well. My coworker had recently quit though, leaving me alone to close. I managed pretty well. I was experienced there by then and knew what to do. There were a couple of times that day when things got busy and the lines were a little bit long, but overall I did well. Soon it became really quiet as we approached the closing time of 7 p.m. In the 6 o'clock hour, not nearly as many people stopped in. By 6:30, it was dead and nobody else was there. So I was at the counter, which was kind of in the exact center of the store. There were clothing racks all around, but then behind me was a wall, and behind that wall was another area where people could shop. My plan was to stay at the counter until close, then lock up, do my finishing tasks, and then clock out and be on my way. However, not long after 6:30, this man entered the store. He had really short hair that was kind of blondish. The man looked fairly young and was wearing sweatpants and a t-shirt. He walked inside the store and looked around, including at me. I was far enough away though where it wasn't a normal thing to greet the customers, so I just stood behind the counter smiling politely. Then the man paced around in the front area of the store for a while and then sat down. There was a little bench area next to the doors just inside. He sat there facing me, just kind of looking in my direction. For the next 20 minutes the man just sat there. I was confused as to what he was doing. Was he waiting for someone? There was nobody else in the store at all other than him and me though. And also nobody else entered the store in the time that he was there. It was getting more and more awkward. Finally, at 6:55, he was still there. It didn't look like he was going to shop, so I decided to walk over to him and let him know that we were closing in 5 minutes. So I left the counter and started to approach the man. When I did, he instantly got up. At first, he started walking towards me. I told him that we were closing in 5 minutes and he would have to be done shopping by then. But the man just zipped right past me, going farther into the store. He didn't even acknowledge anything that I said. He went around to the back part of the store behind the counter. I wanted to make sure that he knew we were closing, so I started to walk over there. When I got to the back though, I witnessed the man push over a full rack of clothes. Then he ran over and pushed over a mannequin, knocking it to the ground. He seemed to be getting violent, and I told him that he needed to leave. Of course, he ignored me though. I moved back over to the counter to call security. I heard things being pushed over and messed up behind me as I called. The man continued as I made the call. He eventually ran back to the front of the store. Then he took a bunch of clothes and tossed them up into the air. After that, he ran out of the store and left. I quickly locked up at that point. Security got there a very short time later, and I explained what happened. Then I had to stay a whole 45 minutes late, picking up the mess and organizing from what the man did. When I finally left, just about everybody in the mall was gone. I didn't even get word if they caught the guy. I'm guessing not, but I really hope they did. Nevertheless, I never saw him again, and nothing like that happened again either.
Last year, I went shopping at our local mall for a birthday present for my wife. We've been married for around 5 years, and when her birthday rolls around, I obviously have no idea what to get her. Besides the usual flowers and stuff, I usually try to buy her a nice piece of jewelry or something, but they all look the same to me, and I have to figure out what kind of stuff my wife likes and all that. So when my wife met up with some of her friends one evening, I went to the mall. It's a pretty nice mall, and it's also rather large and well kept. I went there with just an idea of what to buy. After walking around for a while, confused, I found a jewelry store and was able to find a nice necklace that I thought my wife would like. In case I screwed up again and didn't get something good, I decided to head over to another store to maybe get her something else as well. So after a while, I found this store that sold some jewelry as well as women's clothes. The store was not that big, and I only noticed one other person shopping there, who was a lady at the front end of the place. The store had lots of things for sale, and I wouldn't call it cluttered because everything was very neat and organized. There was just a lot of stuff packed into one place. There was one employee working, who was a woman at the front desk in sort of the middle of the store. The mall was closing fairly soon, so I was not surprised by how quiet it was. I browsed the store a little, and the woman working asked me if I needed help, which I obviously did. I told her of my situation, and she gave me some helpful suggestions. I looked at some of the things that she was talking about and decided what to get. However, I was towards the back of the store looking, kind of by the corner. When I was over there, I don't know how, but I noticed something weird. There was what appeared to be a man, crouched down almost into a ball on the floor. He was behind some clothes at a rack in the far corner and also next to a box. He was mostly obstructed and it was pretty difficult to see him, but it looked like he was hiding. At first, I just ignored it. Obviously, I had no idea what the guy was doing or why, but I just kept to myself. But a few moments later, I realized that something was definitely not right about that. So I walked over to the man and I asked him if he was okay. At first, he just ignored me, so I moved back the clothes that were hanging up and mostly blocking him. Now, anybody who was in the store would be able to see him. He looked up at me and I asked him what he was doing. The man did not answer me, but instead, he quickly got up and walked out of the store, leaving. He moved very fast, and I figured that he was mad that I had found him hiding. I wasn't sure if he was trying to steal something or what. After he left though, I just continued with my shopping. I was inside the store for maybe 10 more minutes. In that time, I was able to find what I wanted to get. Then I went up to the employee and I checked out. After that, I left the store, but right as I was walking out, I noticed the man. By now, it was probably 30 minutes from closing time, so the mall was really quiet. The man who had been hiding in the store was sitting down on a bench across the walkway and just staring at the store that I had come out of. He gave me a dirty look as I walked out. I just had a bad feeling, like maybe he was going to go back in the store or something when I was gone. Why else would he just be sitting there and watching it? So I turned around and I walked back inside of the store. I went back to the woman working and I told her about the man. I said he seemed pretty suspicious, and if he came back in, to be aware of his past behavior. The woman told me thanks and that she had no clue that he had been hiding or was even in the store. She said that if he posed a problem, she would call the mall security. When I walked back out again, the guy was still there. I just had the thought to approach him though. I honestly didn't even know what I was going to say. However, right when I started to cross the walkway, the man got up and quickly walked away again, moving towards the exit. Then I stopped pursuing him, and I just went on my way and left the mall.
Looking back, I'm glad that I spotted the guy when I did. I'm not sure if he had planned to rob the store when it closed or something like that, or what, but either way, I'm glad that he left. I work at this small perfume store in a large mall. This mall has literally hundreds of stores inside of it. The store that I work at is one of the smaller ones, and it only requires one employee at a time. We sell all kinds of perfumes as well as a few skin products. Our store is open until the time the mall closes, which is 8 p.m. So one time I was working at the store until 8, and I would be by myself for the shift. Normally, the store is pretty quiet. Sometimes if the mall is really busy, we'll get a lot of customers, but usually there are not that many people in the store at once. I was sitting behind the counter, which faced directly to the entrance and a large window on either side of the entrance doors. The day went by as usual for the most part. We got some customers here and there, but it was mostly quiet. At probably like 5 or 6 o'clock though, something strange happened. I remember that nobody was in the store at that particular time, and I was just sitting behind the counter. Then I noticed this man walking past the store, and he was wearing this creepy looking mask. It was not quite a clown mask, but it looked sort of similar. He turned and then looked into the window at me and pressed his face up against the glass. It was quite creepy, but I figured it to be a joke and I laughed it off. He stayed at the window for an uncomfortable amount of time, probably over a minute. Then he finally stopped and walked a distance away. Before he passed by the store completely though, he stopped again and then looked in once more. He stared for a little while, before finally turning and walking away. It was very weird. Over the next hour or so, I got a few more customers and we made a few sales. People would walk past the shop down the mall hallway all the time, but the later it got, the quieter it became. Then, at about 7 o'clock, I saw the man again. He walked past the shop once more and did not stop, but turned and looked at me as he passed by. It was very interesting, and I didn't really know what this guy was doing walking around the mall like that. I figured that he was probably messing with a lot of people and trying to get a reaction out of them. I didn't see the man for the rest of the time that we were open though. Then, at 8 o'clock, I went over to the entrance and I closed our 2 glass doors and then locked them. After that, I just had to finish up by doing a few things, and then I could leave for the night. I went back to the counter and would be able to leave in probably 5 minutes. As I was behind the counter though, I saw that the man was back. The same guy, still wearing his creepy mask. He stopped right in front of the 2 doors and started to stare at me. Then he came to the doors and tried opening them, but they were locked. After that, he started to walk away. I figured that he was leaving the mall. After all, it was now closed, and no stores inside would be open anymore. The man did not go out of my sight though. Instead, when he reached the end of the store, he turned around and walked back. Then he kind of started pacing back and forth in front of the shop and looking in at me almost the entire time. I tried my best to ignore him. Soon though, I was done with work and I wanted to leave, but I really didn't want to leave with this guy out front. I was hoping that he would just go away, but he didn't. After several more minutes with him still there, I was starting to get impatient. I hoped that one of the mall's security guards would see him and tell him that he had to go. By now, he was probably one of the last people left in the mall, if not the last. He continued to stand around and look at me every so often. Sometimes he would pace around a little, but he would never move out of my sight. It was like he was just waiting for me to leave because he knew that I was off now, but I wasn't going to. I didn't know who this guy was or what he was capable of doing. Before, I figured him to be harmless, but now I wasn't so sure. This went on for several more minutes. Then, finally, I saw one of the mall security guards come into my view in front of the store. He started speaking to the man. I couldn't really hear what was being said exactly. I could just really hear their voices. Not long at all after they started speaking, the masked man started walking away and went out of sight. The security guard followed. There was not too much of an interaction, and most likely the guard was just telling him that the mall was closed and he had to go now. Still, I waited a couple of minutes and made sure that the guy didn't return. Then I was finally able to leave the store. I walked the now empty hallways of the mall, and then out to my car in the parking lot. When I got outside and into the parking lot, I remember looking to my left. One of the first things that I noticed was the masked man. He was just sort of standing around like 100 feet away. He was sort of near another set of entrance doors and was standing on the sidewalk out front. I just hoped that he would not look over and see me. I walked as fast as I could to get to my car, and I was able to get there okay. Then I quickly left. When I did, I saw the guy still standing in the parking lot. I don't know if he was waiting for me to leave or what. Maybe he thought that I was going to exit out of the other doors. But either way, I was glad that I was just able to get out safely and make it back home. And after that, I never noticed the guy again. I still wonder sometimes what his plans were.
A few years ago, I was doing some shopping at the mall. I had quite a few things that I was getting, and I was there for a while. I would guess that I went to about 10 different stores inside, and I don't even want to think about how much money I spent. However, the story really takes place after I had completed my shopping. I left the mall at night when things were much quieter. Of course, when I had gotten to the mall earlier in the day, the giant parking lot was packed, and I had to park far away in the back. I left the mall, looked around for a moment, and then finally located my car. I walked over to it, and when I reached it, I saw a guy approaching me and my car from another direction. The man wore a gray jacket and had his hands in his pockets. To be honest, he came across as suspicious to me immediately. I reached the driver's door of my car and was about to open it when the guy reached me. He said, "Hey," and I turned to face him. The man then said that he was sorry to bother me, but was wondering if I could give him a ride. I almost immediately said back to him that I was sorry, but no, I couldn't do that. The guy seemed disappointed by this, but he didn't say anything back. He just kept standing there looking at me. I noticed that his left hand he kept in the pocket of his jacket the entire time. It might be crazy of me to think this, but I was afraid he had some type of weapon there, because when he was talking to me, even as he gestured with his right hand as he spoke, his left hand remained still and in his pocket the entire time. After the man was just standing there and not responding to me for a good 10 seconds, I just opened the door to my car, put my bags inside, and then I got inside. He kept standing there and watched as I started my engine and locked my doors. It was really awkward. I drove away, and it felt great to be leaving that situation. Part of me felt slightly bad for not helping the man, if he did just need a short ride somewhere, but I also knew that I would have to be almost crazy to do so. I drove out of the parking lot and got onto the road. Like the mall parking lot, the roads which had been busy earlier were now much quieter. I was maybe 5 minutes into my drive home, which probably had about 10 more minutes left, when I saw a car behind me was speeding up. I expected it to pass me by, but instead, it drove right up to my rear bumper and then just stayed there. I was in the right lane, and there was an open lane right next to us. I was curious as to why they weren't going by me. Finally, I had to turn off at the next exit to go home. When I did, the car behind me did as well. That's when I realized that whoever this was behind me was following me, and I immediately had an idea of who it could be. The car behind me was a smaller car and seemed somewhat old as well, like maybe from the late 90s or the early 2000s. I kept driving home, hoping that the car would stop. Then it started flashing its brights at me on and off. I took another turn to go home, and the car did as well. When I was driving down that road, I happened to notice that I would go past a local police station. At like the last second, I pulled into the parking lot there. When I did, the car behind me did as well. But as I drove right up to the building and parked, I saw the car making a U-turn and then driving away. I was so happy to see it leave. Once I had parked my car, I actually got out and then went inside the police station to let them know what had just happened. I answered some questions for several minutes, but unfortunately, I don't think I was able to help that much. I gave a description of the guy, but didn't get his license plate number. After that, I was able to get home safely. I'm guessing the guy was trying to possibly rob people leaving the mall. I'm not entirely sure why he chose me, but I think it's maybe the fact that I had several shopping bags in my hands, and it made him think that I had money. Either way, I'm glad that I got away from him.
I had a trip to the mall one time as a child that I will never forget. I had just recently turned 7 years old. My mother took me and my 2 younger sisters to the mall one time. My mom had to do some shopping, and I always enjoyed going to the mall, There were so many stores, and they were more interesting than just going to one typical store. On this day in particular when we went, I just recall that it was very busy for some reason. We walked around, and my mom was pretty busy with my siblings. After being in the mall for maybe an hour, I remember that we stopped because one of my younger sister's shoes came untied. My sisters were 3 and 5 at the time, so they were very young. My mother was helping my sister tie her shoe, and I wandered off just a little ways to look in a store window. I'm sure that I was gone for like 30 seconds, at least that's what it felt like. Then I decided to head back, except when I did, my mom was gone. Now, looking back, I'm not sure if I went to the bench that my mom was at with my sisters or if I went to another one. They had all these benches in the middle of the large walkway areas in the mall. Many of them looked very similar, so I'm guessing that I went to the wrong one. And it was very crowded with tons of people walking everywhere. So I looked around and my mother and sisters were gone, so I panicked. I assumed that they left without me, and in the sea of people I needed to find them. I started walking around really fast, desperately trying to find my mother. The longer I walked though, the less I even knew where I was anymore. Pretty soon I was completely lost. I continued to look at every person that was walking by, hoping that one would be my mother, but I couldn't find her. I felt really dumb and I didn't know what I was going to do. After walking around for probably 20 minutes or so, I remembered that this woman approached me. I just remember that she was older than my mom and had dark hair and glasses. She asked me if I was lost, and I said yes. The woman then told me that she was going to help me find my mother. She told me to follow her and said that everything was going to be okay. I felt better at that point and believed the woman that she would help me find my mom. So we started walking through the mall, and I was just following her. I really didn't know the mall layout well or anything. After a while, I remember that we went down this one walkway, and all of a sudden we were going near some exit doors. The woman kept walking towards them. I was pretty sure that my mom wouldn't just leave though. That's when I got confused. The woman continued walking though all the way to the doors. At that point, I asked her why we were leaving. She told me that my mother had left the mall, but she knew where she was. I just didn't believe that. When we got to the doorway, I remember that I stopped. Just at that moment, a man started to walk towards us. It was a mall security guard. He asked the woman who she was to me. The woman didn't say anything and just stood there. The man then said that I had been reported missing. He took out a walkie-talkie and then started to say something into it. At that time, the woman turned and walked away out of the doors very quickly and left the mall. The security guard went over to me and told me to stay by him near the doors and my mother would be there soon. Within 5 minutes, my mom was there. Apparently, my mom had been looking all over for me. She told that very same security guard earlier that I was lost and described my appearance and what I was wearing. The other security guards were also informed, and as my mom looked around, they watched the exits. He saw the other woman who was clearly not my mother trying to leave with me. I'm really grateful to that security guard. If not for him, I'm not sure what would have happened. I remember that the police got called and stuff, but beyond that, I don't remember much of anything. That was a really crazy trip to the mall though.
Several months ago, I sat at a mall food court by myself. I was taking a break from shopping to have something to eat. The mall was very busy, and so was the food court, but I had a lot of shopping to do. I was looking at my phone as I was eating, and out of nowhere, I received a text message. It was not from anyone in my contacts, and the message said, "Hey." I figured that it was a wrong number, and I ignored it. But they texted me again, probably about a minute later. This time, they said, "I see you." I stopped what I was doing and looked up, checking around the crowded food court. Nobody appeared to be looking at me, though. I was sure that this was still a wrong number. I decided to text the number back, though. I said, "Who is this? I think you might have the wrong number." Very quickly, I got a response saying, "No, I have the right number. I can see you eating right now." This response sent a chill down my spine. This particular mall was not that close to my house, probably almost an hour away. I didn't know of anybody who knew that I was here and would prank me, like a friend or something. Plus, this was a new number that I didn't know. I once again looked all around the immediate area. There had to be hundreds of people, and it could have been anyone. It was basically useless to try and guess who it could be. I texted the number back, asking once again who this was. I didn't get a response after this. Now I wasn't really sure what to do. Was this just some harmless prank, or a creep stalking me? I didn't text them back and just kept eating and minding my own business. But I looked up and scanned the area every so often, trying to find somebody looking at me. It would be like finding a needle in a haystack, though. A few minutes later, the number tried calling me. My phone was ringing, but I had no interest in talking to them. I declined the call. After that, I decided to leave the area. I walked away to keep shopping. I had quite a bit more to do. For the next several hours, I walked all through the large mall into many different stores. I bought a lot of things, and by the time I was done shopping, I forgot all about the random person texting me. I hadn't received any texts since I was in the mall food court. I hadn't been called either. Finally, when I was done shopping, I went to leave the mall. I was within feet of the exit doors when I felt my phone vibrate. I didn't think anything of it and assumed that it was just one of my friends texting me like usual. I took out my phone to check as I approached the doors. The text was from the same unknown person, and it said, "Leaving so soon?" I couldn't believe it. I stopped and looked behind me. There was still a decent amount of people in the mall walking around that I could see. Again, nobody was directly looking at me or anything like that. I still had no clue who it was. I decided there to just leave, and I walked quickly out of the mall. I checked back to the doors to see if anybody followed me outside, though. A few people did leave behind me, but there was no way of really knowing. Nobody seemed to follow me to the area of the parking lot where my car was, and I got inside my car quickly and left. I drove back home, which took about an hour. I was 100% sure that I was done with whoever this person was. Still, I had so many questions. How did they get my number? Why were they watching me? And most importantly, who was doing it? I wondered these things the entire drive back, but I still figured that it was all behind me. After getting home, I went inside and put the things away that I had bought. It was at this time when I received another text. This was pretty strange for whoever this was to still be texting me. They said, "Nice house." I thought they had to be joking. Just to be safe though, I walked over to the front window and looked outside. It was nighttime now, and I carefully peeled back the blinds a little. I saw a car slowly driving down the street past my house. The speed that it was traveling was much slower than cars normally would. Plus, my street is usually fairly quiet. There was no doubt in my mind this was the person who had been texting me. Obviously, I couldn't see inside their car, but I could see that the vehicle appeared to be a smaller sized SUV. It drove off out of sight and down the street. I texted back, asking again who was doing this. They didn't respond that time either, which was no surprise. After this, I finally blocked the number. I watched out my window several more times that night, but I never saw the car returning. Since then, nothing like that has happened. I still wonder about it though, and I haven't gotten any answers. Was it some random person stalking me? The fact that they possibly followed me for an hour back to my house just to drive by is really creepy.
Years ago, for a short period of time, I used to work at one of those kiosks that you see in the middle of mall walkways. I worked for a cell phone service, and the job was usually not too bad. It was a large mall that got tons of foot traffic, so sometimes people would stop and talk to me about the service. Luckily, I did not have to approach customers like the people who spray you with perfume or try to clean your shoes when you're standing there. I would just sit at my chair and basically do nothing, but if people looked at the phones or had questions, I could help them out. I would do some people watching as well, which was always entertaining. Each day that I worked, I probably saw hundreds if not thousands of people. So one time I was working a shift from the afternoon until close. The mall closed every day at 9 p.m., so that's when I would leave. When I started, things were very busy. I got a few customers here and there and some people to talk to, but for the most part, I just sat there and went on my phone or looked around casually at the people in the mall. I remember that sometime in the late afternoon, I started to notice this one man because he walked by several times. He was a taller man with grayish hair and looked to be in his 40s. He was wearing a gray sweater and black pants. I noticed him walk by only because I saw him again like 10 minutes later. I thought nothing of it until I saw him again a little while later. I just thought to myself, wow, that's the third time that I've seen that guy. Now, when I people watch, I obviously don't stare at anyone. I'm just there pleasantly looking around and ready to help customers if they need me. So then I saw the man for a fourth time, and I thought that was kind of strange. But at that point, I figured that he was just a mall walker. There are many people that like to get exercise by walking through malls. I ended up noticing him several more times over the course of the next few hours. When it got to be nighttime, the mall got quieter and quieter as it approached closing. But one thing that remained the same was that I was still seeing the guy. I recall that around 7-something at night, he walked by and looked over at me. I casually saw him and he walked by again. Then it was 8 o'clock and the mall would be closing in an hour. I saw the man walk by again and he looked at me once more. I was buried in my phone for the next half hour or so after that, but I noticed the man again after 8:30 and again at probably around 8:40. He would walk by one way and then a while later walk by the other way. It was to the point that it almost seemed creepy. He seemed to look over at me with a somewhat strange expression on his face each time. I didn't really know what was going on. This seemed to be a bit excessive for mall walking. I remained at my kiosk until 9 o'clock. The last time that I saw the guy that night was probably at about 8:55. After closing things up and leaving, I was still wondering about the guy. However, I did not see him or anything as I walked through the mall to the parking lot and then out to my car. I drove home to my apartment that was less than 10 minutes away. I remember that after arriving home, I was inside of my living room hanging out. My apartment was on the second floor of the building and was a pretty standard place. I remember that I heard somebody walk by down my hallway, and a short time later, I heard somebody walking by again. When this happened several more times, I got curious, because usually the apartment was not busy with people walking by much. So I got up and I went over to my door. Then I looked out of the peephole. When I did, at first I saw nothing. Then I started to hear footsteps again. They were approaching and getting closer. Soon, I saw the same guy who I had seen at the mall. He walked right past my door, looking over at my apartment with the same expression on his face that he had at the mall. After he passed by my door, he kept walking. Then, about a minute later, I saw him walk back and do the exact same thing. I was extremely creeped out by this. I had never seen this guy before that day. Why was he at my apartment doing this? I was so creeped out that I went away from my door and into my bedroom. Then I closed the door there as well. I didn't want to hear him or anything. I turned on my TV and tried to distract myself. Eventually, I was able to, and I went to bed. The next morning, he was gone. After that, I never saw him at the mall or my apartment again. I still don't know how to explain it. Was it all a prank or something? Did he follow me home? I'm pretty sure that he did not live in my apartment building because that's the only time that I ever saw him there. It's all very strange. This happened back when I was a child. I think I was about 10 years old or so. I remember that I went to the mall with my parents and siblings. I have 3 siblings, all of which are younger than me. So any time that we went anywhere back then, my parents had their hands full. We were at this mall for a long time shopping. I don't really remember what we were getting, but I just know that we were there into the nighttime. At one point, I had to go to the bathroom, and my parents and everybody were at the food court sitting at a table. I mentioned that I had to use the restroom, and my parents said okay. So I got up, and I thought that I knew exactly where the restrooms were, when in fact, I did not. In my mind, they were right around the corner and down this long hallway. The reality was that I went to the wrong corner, and I went to the opposite one. So when I got around this corner, there was in fact a very long hallway there. There was nobody else there, and the hallway went extremely far. I'm not really sure why. At the end of it, you could go left or right. So I walked down the hallway and then went to the right, thinking that's where the bathrooms were. But at the end of that hallway, there was just a door that was locked, and it didn't look like a bathroom. I realized that it was maybe the other way. When I was back there, I noticed this random guy walking down the long hallway towards me. He was not wearing any kind of a uniform, but just regular clothes, so he didn't work at the mall. I walked past him and then went straight to the other hallway. When I got to the end of this hallway, it was basically the same thing. No bathrooms, but just a locked door that led to who knows what. I noticed the man who I had seen though. He came slowly walking towards me. I just had a really bad feeling about him for some reason. He didn't appear to be lost or confused like I was, and he also didn't appear to work at the mall. But possibly even more concerning was that he appeared to just be staring at me. I didn't know why he was looking at me, but he slowly walked closer and approached. I realized that I was cornered. I would have to walk right past him to get out of there. Without knowing what else to do, I saw there was a door with an exit sign above it. It was certainly not a common exit for the mall, and looked more like an emergency one. When the man kept walking towards me and was less than 50 feet away, I just walked to the door and opened it. I was surprised when the door actually opened up, and no alarm went off or anything. When I got outside, I had no idea where I was. This was like behind the mall and not near the parking lot. I looked around and saw a small sidewalk and then a grassy area with some trees. The area was very dark now that it was nighttime. I slowly walked into the grass, and then I heard the door start to open again behind me. I knew that was the man. He was leaving the mall too. So at that point, I just took off and started running. I sprinted through the grass and trees, trying to estimate where I had to go. I then found the mall again and ran alongside of it until I got to the corner. Then I saw another entrance door. I quickly ran back inside the mall without seeing the man again. Then I found one of those mall maps and located the food court. I was back to my parents within probably 5 minutes. When I arrived back, they asked me what took so long, and I told them about it. They ended up talking to mall security and stuff. The police ended up coming, but the man was gone by then. I was told they were going to look at security footage and everything would be okay. After that, we didn't go back to the mall for a while. I'm not really sure what ended up happening, if the guy was caught or what. I'm really glad that I was able to get away from him though. This happened back when I was a teenager and in high school. I was a freshman, and I lived in a house in the suburbs not too far outside of the city. It was a densely populated area, and we lived about a mile away from a pretty large mall. It was also about a half mile from my school, so it was a popular hangout for a lot of the kids. I would go there with friends after school some days, or on weekends other times. One weekend I was at the mall with 4 of my friends, Jesse, Alex, Martin, and Lisa. We walked around and did some shopping. Then we were all hanging out in one of the food courts, sitting at a table and talking. It was at this time when a random woman approached the table. She appeared to be in her 30s and had dark blonde hair and was wearing sunglasses. We all looked up at her, and the woman said that she needed to talk to me specifically. I didn't know why, because I had never seen her before. I asked her what, and she told me just to follow her. So I got up and asked her again what it was she wanted to talk to me about. The woman then told me to follow her and she would explain, so I did. By now I was very curious. We went to the end of the food court and then turned into a random walkway in the mall. After walking for longer than I expected, the woman turned down this other hallway. This one, though, was very long and skinny. There were no stores down this hallway, but just some storage closets or possibly janitor's closets. I was very confused, but for some reason I kept walking. I also remembered that at the end of the hallway there was an exit sign. When we got about halfway down the hallway, I actually saw the door to one of the storage closets open up. At least I assumed that that's what those rooms were. When it did, these 2 men walked out. They were both looking at me and were starting to approach. Now, at this point, I still didn't know what was going on, but something about the situation gave me a bad feeling. I stopped where I was and I asked the woman what was happening. She just told me to come on and to follow her. The men now started walking in my direction. My instincts were telling me to leave, so I just turned around and started walking away. I heard footsteps moving after me and heard the woman tell me to come back, but I ignored it. This only made me go faster. I was able to make it back out to a normal walkway where there were a few other people around. I did not see the woman or the 2 men leave the small hallway that we had been in. I walked back to my friends, and they all asked me what that was about. When I told them what had happened, they were very confused. Then the 5 of us went back to the hallway to look, but the people were gone. So we started walking around the mall and doing a little more shopping. About 30 minutes later, I remember I noticed the woman walking a ways behind us. At that point, we decided to leave. It was very weird. Luckily, we were not followed out of the mall. After that, I never saw any of those people again. I'm not sure what was going to happen, if the woman was setting me up to get robbed or something. I really don't know. It just seemed very suspicious. This is something that happened back in the 1990s when I was in high school. I used to hang out with my friends at our local mall all the time. The mall was very popular back then. One time, I remember that we were going to this one new store that had just opened. It was some kind of clothing store that was having a big grand opening. I was with my friend Shauna at the time, and we were waiting in line to get into the store. The store was already open, but they would only let a certain amount of people in at a time because there were so many people there. So as we stood in line for a while, I told Shauna that I was going to get a pretzel and would be right back. She would keep our place in line, and I recall that it seemed like it was going to be at least a 10-minute wait before we got into the store. I could see the pretzel shop just down the way, so I walked over there and got one. I was gone from Shauna for maybe 2 or 3 minutes, I would say. Then I walked back over to her. When I arrived back, she told me that some guy had been following me. I had no idea. I asked her what she was talking about, and she pointed to a guy that was now sitting on a bench not too far away. She said that she saw me go to get the pretzel and the man got in line behind me. But after I left, he left without ordering. She said that she could see him just staring at me and then following. When I got back in line with Shauna though, obviously he couldn't, and he went and sat down on the bench. As she was telling me this, I saw the man look up at us and then quickly look back down away. I didn't know how I could have been so oblivious that I hadn't noticed him. We stayed in line and kind of kept an eye on the man as we waited. I was hoping he would walk away, but he didn't. He just kept sitting there, and here and there he would lock eyes with me for a second. The man had sort of stringy hair, like it was long and greasy, but he was also balding a little. He also had a goatee. After a while, we were finally let into the store. We made our way in and shopped. We were inside for probably like 15 minutes, and I remember that we each got some stuff. As we were inside the store shopping, I forgot all about the man. Eventually, we left. When we did though, I saw the man still sitting there on the bench in the same spot, and I remembered him. And now we started to walk away, and when we started to walk away, I noticed the man getting up. Shauna and I walked to the right, and we saw that the man was starting to walk after us. This is where our instincts really kicked in. We both just started running. We sprinted through the mall, with some people probably thinking that we were crazy, but the man did not sprint after us. I think he realized how crazy suspicious that would look. We ran and ran until we got to the exits. Then we left and drove home. We never saw that man again after that. I'm really glad that we didn't, because we hung out at the mall many more times. Maybe the man had seen us before, or maybe that was his only time at that mall. I'm really not sure, but I'm glad that we did not stick around to see what he wanted. Back when I was a teenager, my best friend's name was Jake, and we went to school together. We also lived in the same general area. I think when I was 16, I was over at Jake's house hanging out one day. We were in his basement playing video games, and I remember that his other friend stopped by. It was a kid named Parker who didn't go to our school, but lived just down the street from Jake. I didn't really know Parker, but the three of us hung out in Jake's basement for a while. Then Parker said that he was going to this abandoned mall that was nearby and wanted to know if we would come with. I kind of knew about the mall because I had lived in the city for my whole life. It was on the other side of town from my house, but pretty close to Jake's, and it was a very old mall. I had actually been to the mall several times with my parents when I was a young child, but the place closed in the early 2000s. So Jake really wanted to go see the mall. I, on the other hand, hadn't really planned to. Abandoned places didn't really seem that interesting to me. But I had nothing else going on, so I said sure. Parker, Jake, and I then left Jake's house and walked down the sidewalk to the end of his street. Then we walked a few more blocks and crossed a walking bridge that went over a highway. There, a little past a woods, it led to the rear parking lot of the mall. I didn't realize how close it was to Jake's house. It had only took about 10 minutes to walk there. It was pretty interesting to see the mall now. It was still standing, but certainly looked abandoned. The parking lot had lots of grass and weeds growing through the many obvious cracks. The pavement of the parking lot was a very light gray color, and the paint from the parking spaces was so worn it was nearly invisible. I'm honestly not sure why they never tore the mall down or did anything with the property. So we started to walk closer, and then there was this one door that didn't have a handle on it, but was open just a crack. I didn't really want to go inside, and I didn't think that Parker or Jake had any intentions of going inside. But apparently they did, because they all walked over to the door, and Parker swung it open and we all entered. The door had been held open by a beer bottle. I asked right away if Parker had ever been inside the mall before, and he claimed that he had. The lights were all off, so we needed to use our flashlights on our phones to see, although it was not completely dark because the mall had some natural light from the ceiling in most of the walkways. When we entered the mall, we were in what appeared to be a former store. It was completely empty other than just some carpet, and we then walked out into one of the main mall walkways. Now that was pretty cool. Although basically everything was gone, there were still some signs and remnants of signs. A few old advertisements and designs were still there as well, like how the walls were painted. It felt like I was going back in a time machine at least 10 years ago. We explored a bit, and then walked around to another hallway which was much darker. The whole time I was sort of on edge. We were in this quieter hallway, and I heard the sound of footsteps way farther down. We all stopped and listened. At that point, the footsteps stopped as well. We shined our lights but couldn't see down that far. So at that point, we were creeped out enough and turned back. But we did not leave. Instead, we just went down another hallway. As we walked down there, a while later, we heard footsteps off in the distance again, this time behind us. It seemed like somebody was inside the mall. I had no idea who could possibly be in the mall that was clearly abandoned. I remember that Parker actually called out. He shouted, asking if anybody was there, and said that we were simply lost and would leave if we weren't supposed to be there. I thought maybe it was a security guard or police at that point, but nobody responded. It was just silence. I suggested we leave, and we turned to another hallway. Parker said that he knew another way that led back to where we had come in, so we walked down a few more walkways. I honestly had no clue where we were anymore. It was really dark basically the whole time. Then, out of nowhere, we heard footsteps behind us again. This time, they were much louder and closer than before, and they were heading towards us. The three of us just took off running. Nobody bothered to look back and see who it was, but we all just ran. When we did, I heard the footsteps start to run after us. We sprinted for at least a minute, and finally I saw the main hallway near where we had come in. We kept running all the way until we got to the store that we entered through. Then we went into it and found the door leading out to the parking lot. After running through the parking lot and off the property, we finally stopped to catch our breath. Whoever was inside did not leave the mall. We then walked all the way back to Jake's house again. I went home a short time later. None of us knew who was inside that mall, if it was just another explorer or what, but I'm guessing it was probably a homeless guy or maybe somebody who was there to do drugs or something. Perhaps they were just trying to scare us. Either way, it certainly did get us scared, and we never went back to that mall. Something strange happened when I went to the mall a couple of weeks ago. I went shopping by myself one weekend. It's a mall nearby where I live, which has quite a few stores in it. I enjoy shopping at this mall because it's pretty nice. A couple of hours after I got there, I was in one of the stores looking at clothes. As I was in a random aisle, nobody else was around me. I was kind of towards the back of the store. Randomly, I heard a loud noise nearby and looked over to see a display shelf falling over. I didn't see the other side of it, so I assumed that somebody had either ran into it or pushed it over. It fell to the ground and into the aisle that I was in, and I looked and didn't see anybody nearby at all. It was confusing. It was like whoever knocked it over had quickly ran away. I walked over, and it wasn't a huge mess, so I just picked it back up. Nobody else was over there. I continued on and eventually left that store. When I was in another store maybe 20 minutes later, another weird thing happened. I was once again in an aisle by myself. Out of nowhere, something came flying over from the next aisle over and nearly hit me. It was a random hat, and I thought that this was really weird now. That was two strange things to happen in the past half hour. Was somebody messing with me for some reason? I wasn't sure. I walked out of the aisle and around to the next one and looked, but didn't see anyone. The other people in the store just appeared to be normal shoppers. There was no way of knowing if it had been them or not. So I just continued shopping, hoping that nothing else strange would happen. For the next 30 minutes or so, I went to a couple more stores and things were fine. Then I was walking down a hallway in the mall, and randomly I felt something hit the back of my leg. I stopped and looked behind me, and it was a tennis ball. Somebody must have thrown it at me. I looked around and didn't see who had done it. There weren't a ton of people around there, but there were a few. Some people looked at me picking up the tennis ball, but I still didn't know who had done it. The area that the ball had been thrown from was near an intersection of another hallway, so the person could have easily run away, or they could have ducked into a store or something. I just kept walking, and once more hoped that it would stop. For about an hour, nothing happened. I figured that whoever it was had stopped messing with me now. At one point, I stopped in the food court and was sitting down drinking a coffee. It's a large food court and it was pretty crowded on this day. Countless people were scattered around. At that point, I went on my phone and I saw that I had a notification on Instagram. I had a follow request on Instagram from someone. I looked at their profile and it was a guy wearing a blue ski mask. I could not tell who he was. We didn't have any mutual followers, and when I looked at his page, he had 2 pictures of himself in various places at night, but in both photos he was wearing the ski mask. For whatever reason, I just felt like maybe him and the strange things happening in the mall were linked. I don't know why, but I just had that thought. Then, literally, just as I was looking at the page on Instagram, I saw that I got a message request from that same user. I looked at it and he said, "I can see you." This really freaked me out, and I now knew that it had to be the same person. I looked around the food court thinking maybe I would see somebody with a blue ski mask on. I didn't though. Whoever he was hiding in plain sight, and I don't think he was wearing the ski mask. There were so many people I didn't notice anybody staring at me or anything. So I responded to him asking who he was. He did not respond to me. I was so creeped out that I decided to leave right then and there. I got up and quickly made my way for the nearest exit. I left the mall, went out to my car, and drove home. Thankfully, I wasn't followed or anything. I also blocked the Instagram account. I'm not sure who that was messing with me, and how did they find my Instagram? I haven't been back to that mall since. I used to work at a clothing store in a mall a while back when I was younger. I liked working there, and it was a decent-sized store. Most of the time there would be 2 or 3 of us working at once in the store, sometimes more or less depending on the day and how busy we were expected to be. I was friends with most all the other coworkers, and they were nice people. One time I was working and things were pretty quiet. I was in the store walking around and doing stuff. I was organizing things on the racks, putting things back that were in the wrong place, and folding clothes, things like that. My coworker, I believe Darla, was at the registers, and then my boss Christine was also working. Christine managed 2 clothing stores in the large mall that we had. She would often go back and forth between the 2. So a few hours into my shift, and things were pretty quiet. We were supposed to get another coworker into work within the hour, which is when we would also probably be getting busier. So I remember that I got a text on my phone from Christine, telling me to take my break now. I was confused, because normally I would wait until the next worker got there, and if I took my break now, we would only have 1 person working, because I assumed Christine was not there at the moment because I didn't see her. So I walked over to the break room, which was at the back end of the store. I went inside, and obviously the room was completely empty. I went over to clock out, but when I did, I heard a noise. Somebody else was in the room. I turned, and I saw this man standing there right in front of the doorway leading back out to the store. I didn't know who he was. He definitely did not work there. He was just standing there, looking at me. I finally spoke, asking the man what he was doing back here. He didn't say anything to me, but he started to walk closer. I had a really bad feeling about this. The guy was big, much taller and larger than me. I asked him what he was doing, but he still didn't say anything. As he continued to approach, I felt like I was trapped with no place to go. I looked around and tried to think of something. Then, I didn't know what else to do, so I reached over and I pulled the fire alarm. Instantly, it started loudly ringing all throughout the store. There was no fire, but I felt like this was still an emergency. The man stopped and did not come any closer. I remember he angrily asked me what I was doing. Then I moved away to the side. The man then turned around and left the break room. I left a few moments after him and saw the guy quickly walking out of the store. My coworker Darla was looking very confused. I told her what happened and the police were called. Every other customer evacuated the store and the fire department had been alerted as well. Christine showed up a few minutes later. I told her what happened, and it was then that I found out that Christine did not have her cell phone. She said that she had lost it and couldn't find it anywhere. She thought maybe it was in her office or the break room. And then I realized that that man must have somehow got her phone and texted me to go into the break room. The police got there and the alarm was turned off. They spoke with us about the incident for a while and said they would look into it. Also, later that day, Christine's cell phone was found in a flower pot near the entrance of the mall. Looking back, I'm glad that I thought to pull the fire alarm. I feel like it might have saved me. I went shopping at the mall with my sister a couple of years ago. We do lots of stuff together, and she's just a few years older than I am. We went to this really huge mall that's about 15 minutes from the city we live in. We went inside and shopped for hours. I think we went to like 20 different stores and spent more money than I would like to admit. But when we were finally done, it was a day well spent. When we left the mall, it was probably like 5 or 6 p.m. Things were quieter around there now. We parked, I think, on the second level of the parking garage, or maybe the third, but we were parked next to the wall in the back row. After putting our many shopping bags in the car, we both got in the front. My sister was driving, and I was in the front passenger seat. Before leaving, though, my sister got a FaceTime from one of our friends. It was a girl who's good friends with the both of us, and we started talking to her before leaving. During this conversation, maybe 5 minutes into it, out of nowhere we saw somebody walk right up to the front driver's door of the car. I thought that it was whoever had drove the car that was parked next to us, but it wasn't. It was a man, and he instantly turned and started knocking on my sister's window. My sister quickly ended the phone call and looked up at the man. She rolled down the window just a crack. I was curious to know what the man wanted as well, but also suspicious. He asked for a ride and said that he really needed to get someplace. Obviously, it would be a bad idea to give a ride to a random stranger. My sister said no, we couldn't do it. After saying no, the man instantly walked back, and I thought he was walking away, but he stopped at the rear driver's side door and then tried opening it. The door was locked though, and he couldn't get in. Then the man came back and started banging on my sister's window. She yelled at him to go away. He did not. He just continued to bang on the window, and I was afraid that it might break. So then my sister put the car into reverse and started backing up. She was able to get out of the space and then started to drive away. The man chased after us though. With it being a parking garage, my sister could not go very fast. We had to go back around to where the ramp went down. The man was able to catch up with us pretty easy. Then he ran alongside the car and jumped onto the hood of the car and blocked the windshield. It was one of the craziest things I had ever seen. In this moment, my sister then stopped the car. The man started yelling and then banging on the windshield. We happened to be passing by one of the walkways that led into the mall. When I looked over, I noticed a man walking on the walkway and starting to enter the parking lot area. This man then started yelling at the guy on the hood of our car. He told him to get down and asked what he was doing. The man got off the hood of my sister's car and then started charging at the other guy. We watched him attempt to attack the guy. However, this man entering the parking lot was a big guy. He looked strong, like maybe he was a weightlifter or possibly he had been in the military, because when the crazy man approached him, the guy easily took him to the ground. He was yelling at the guy, and the other man struggled to attack him. The strong man yelled at us to call 911 as he had the man in some kind of a wrestling pin or something. We did as he asked and continued to sit there. Within a minute or two, somebody else left the mall to go into the parking lot. They instantly saw what was happening though and turned around and left. The crazy guy was yelling and cursing, and the strong guy was telling him to shut up. My sister and I were not really sure what to do, so we just stayed there in the car. Thankfully, within about 5 minutes, the cops got there. I think there are some that always patrol around the mall. They were able to detain the crazy guy and talk to all of us involved. There was also security camera footage in the garage which would verify the whole incident. After talking with officers, we went home. That was my craziest trip to the mall ever. There was an old, nearly abandoned mall not too far from where I lived. This was a few years ago now, and I don't live there anymore, but I had lived in the area for a while at the time and passed by it several times. I didn't know if it was open or not, but one night, for whatever reason, I got curious and decided to check it out. I'm not a guy who loves to explore abandoned buildings or anything like that, but I've always found malls interesting, and I've been fascinated with retail businesses and their history and whatnot. Going into old and outdated stores and malls always feels kind of interesting, like you're going back in time or something. So I went to this mall and I parked in the nearly empty parking lot. There were just a couple of cars scattered around, maybe 5. I couldn't tell if they were maybe mall employees, customers, or just random cars of people who weren't even on the property. I got out and then walked to the doors. From the outside, the mall looked like it hadn't been touched since the late 1990s. I walked up to the doors, half expecting them to be locked. The first door was, but to my surprise, the second one opened. I looked around and saw that it was mostly dark inside. I started walking down the hallway and there were no open stores. All the spaces for stores were either empty or completely covered up. But that was just one of the hallways, so I kept walking. I got farther in and things had been completely silent. That's when I started hearing noises. At first, I heard what sounded like something falling over a ways away ahead of me and out of my sight. I couldn't tell where exactly it was coming from, if it was inside of a store or in a hallway or what. I walked into another hallway with more abandoned stores. It was kind of interesting to see despite the noises because it looked like it hadn't been touched in many years. There, I heard the sound of what sounded like whistling. It was really quiet, and whoever was whistling was not whistling any tune in particular. I was getting creeped out. As I kept walking, I heard another set of footsteps but far away. It was probably the same person, but I didn't know for sure. After being in the mall for maybe 5 minutes and exploring a couple of hallways, I decided that maybe I should leave. This was a little bit too creepy for me. I figured that I was probably not even supposed to be there in the first place. I mean, I hadn't seen an open store at all. I turned around and then heard the footsteps again. Somebody else was definitely in there with me and not that far away. I walked back down the hallways I had come through. Then I made it back to the main doors. But when I got there, they were blocked off. I tried it anyways, but it wouldn't open. It was like somebody had locked it. Meanwhile, I heard the footsteps off in the distance. I turned around and quickly walked to another hallway to try to find another exit. As I was doing this, it was like the footsteps got louder and louder. Not closer, but just louder, as if the person was stomping or something now. I started jogging down the hallways. There was no exit in the one that I was in now, so I turned and found another hallway. As I jogged, I heard the footsteps still off in the distance. Finally, I went down another hallway and saw some doors. I sprinted to them, hoping that these would open, unlike the others. When I made it there, I tried the door, and thankfully, it actually opened. I left and then sprinted out into the parking lot and around the building. I found my car back where I had parked it, and did not stop running until I had made it back to the car and went inside. Then I drove straight home. Not that long ago, the mall got demolished, and they're building strip malls on the property now. I don't know what was going on there that night. Why did the doors get locked behind me? Who else was in there with me? I may never know. A few years back, I was working at a mall. I worked in a department store that was sort of in the middle of the mall, and it was usually fairly busy. I had the job for several years, and among all the workers we had a conspiracy joke about the faded man. He was a person reported by multiple workers and even mall shoppers as a mysterious figure with his face covered. He would allegedly be seen late after hours or in creepy spots during the day. Nobody had any proof, which was kind of odd. One of my friends, Kevin, who worked as a security guard, claimed that he had seen him on camera footage once or twice, but none of us were allowed to view the footage without clearance. Even Kevin said trying to zoom in on the man's face was difficult because the quality of the video just wasn't that great, so we couldn't really identify him. A lot of us didn't buy it, and I was very skeptical, having never seen him myself, though I always sort of wanted to. But one night, that all changed. It was a little bit before closing, and I had taken the last shift at the store. Most of the other workers had already left. Only my manager Tony and I were around doing some late shift work. All of a sudden, I felt like I was being watched. I needed to look around to see who was there, so I stopped and glanced up, but I saw nobody. I thought to myself that it was all in my head. As I turned back to my work though, I saw a tall figure standing near the storage door, half hidden in the shadows, just watching me. His face was mostly covered, and he was tall, about 6'6". I couldn't believe it. He was just standing there watching me, or at least that's what it looked like. I couldn't hear my thoughts over my heart pounding. He was real. I stuttered and called out in fear as Tony came running over in a panic, asking what was wrong. I just pointed. Tony had never seen him either, but he didn't hesitate to shout, "The mall's closed, you need to leave." The tall man standing in the shadows didn't respond. He didn't even move. Then he took a step towards us, and in that moment I started to panic badly. I began hyperventilating because it was only Tony and me in this entire store with a man who was like 6'7" and had been known to disappear in an instant. As Tony and I stepped back in fear, the man looked to his left as if he saw something and suddenly bolted. I couldn't move, still terrified of what this man could do if he got a hold of us. But Tony sprinted after him without a second thought. I ran after Tony because I didn't want to be left alone. So we ran behind this guy towards the back room of the store. I couldn't stop shaking as we looked between boxes in the dimly lit back room. All of a sudden, Tony bolted left, sprinting into one of the aisles, disappearing into the darkness. I was left alone again. Then I heard a box fall to my right. There he was, standing even closer than before. This time I could make out his face a little better. He was about 40 years old, super tall, with long hair, a long beard, and just darkness in his eyes. He looked malicious, like he wanted to hurt me. It was a terrible feeling when I saw him staring at me and I couldn't move. He started taking slow steps forward, and then Tony yelled out my name. I looked over in relief to see Tony running back my ways, and then when I looked back towards the man, he was gone. I didn't know if he had disappeared or if he was ever really there and it was just my imagination, but I was too scared to even process what I thought had just happened. My mind was racing and I almost blacked out. We searched for a while longer but couldn't find anything, not a trace. We even checked the footage, but it just had happened to be in a place where no cameras were, as if he knew all the blind spots. I couldn't sleep for days after that, fearing that he had followed us home or something. Weeks later, after taking time off because I was so traumatized, he was finally caught. Tony had seen him one night again and made sure to call the cops this time instead of chasing him. Officers searched the area and found a small crawl space between the ceiling tiles, which had been used to turn into a makeshift campsite. When I read the news report, I learned that the man had been hiding there for almost a whole year. They never released who he was or how he ended up in the mall, only that he was still in custody for questioning. I ended up quitting because I couldn't fathom the idea of reliving that situation again. This happened last year. I went to a really large mall with my friend Hannah, and we live not too far away from it. We go shopping there together occasionally. The mall has pretty much every store you could want and is very nice. On this particular time, it was a Saturday, so the mall was very busy. There were tons of other people shopping. At one point, we were in this really open area. From far away, I saw this guy was just standing there and he appeared to be staring at me. I continued to look at him, wondering if he was actually staring at me or somebody else who was nearby. The guy was large, had dark hair but was almost bald, and also had a slight beard. He continued to look at me and started pointing and waving. I looked around and was sure now that he was looking at me and not somebody else. I'm sure that I also had a very confused look on my face. I pointed him out to Hannah, who agreed that he seemed to be looking at me. I wasn't creeped out at the time, but more so amused, because he was really far away and there were lots of other people around. The man continued to stand there and point at me for a minute or so. Then he started walking over to us rather quickly. We easily walked away and blended in with the crowd and were able to escape the man. Hannah and I talked about him for a minute or two, wondering what he was doing. Maybe he thought we were someone else. I really didn't know. We just kept shopping after that though. About an hour later, I saw the man again. This time we were in a mall walkway. The man was coming up from the opposite side and approaching us. He looked at me almost right after I spotted him. He turned and then started walking towards us again. We were much closer to him this time, but still able to get away. Very quickly we went left, and then we went down an escalator to a lower level and then into a nearby store before the man knew where we had gone. Then we continued once again with our shopping. I was really hoping that that was the last we would see of the man, and for a long time it was. For the next 2 or 3 hours that Hannah and I were at the mall, we did not encounter that creepy guy. I figured that we had lost him and he left, and I pretty much forgot about him after that. When Hannah and I were finally done shopping that afternoon, we left the mall. As we were walking outside though, I remember I heard some footsteps behind us. They were going kind of fast, so I turned around. That same creepy guy from the mall was there. He looked at us and had a grin on his face that looked anything but friendly. As he walked towards us, I asked him who he was. The man then said, "You girls looking for a ride? I can drive you home." I said no. We were walking to Hannah's car in the parking lot, which was just around the corner. The man started walking even closer to us. He got like right behind us within inches, and then said to us, "You guys are going to come with me." I didn't even think at all, I just started running. Hannah followed right after, and we both sprinted away from the man. He briefly gave chase, but was not very quick. We ran to Hannah's car, got inside, and left. Then we reported the guy. I haven't seen him since. We've been to the mall a few times since that incident, and obviously we haven't seen him. There's so many people there typically, and I'm not sure if he wanted to kidnap us or what, but I'm glad that we got away from him. This is something that happened back in the late 90s. I was a teenager, and my friends and I used to hang out at our local mall all the time. It was what a lot of teens did back then. We would get out of school at like 3 p.m. or something, and then go to the mall until like 5 or 6 usually. We would also sometimes go there on the weekends. The stores were interesting and fun to shop at, and you could always hang out and chill at the food courts. For me personally, my parents were gone at work until like 5:30 or so I never had to be back right after school was done. I didn't go to the mall every day, but probably like 2 or 3 times a week on average. One time, I was there with my friends Ryan, Emily, and Jose. I will also mention that I'm a female. So we got to the mall like any other day and walked around just talking and stuff. I don't know if people would agree with me or not, but mall stores were way cooler back then. I remember we just looked through a couple of stores, and then I think it was Jose who said that he had to be back early. My other friends for some reason also decided to go. I didn't want to go just yet though. Normally we hung out there longer, and I remember that it was only like 4 o'clock. So I said bye to my friends and I decided that I would stay there for just a while longer. I went into another store and was shopping around, seeing if I wanted to actually buy something. At one point, a man came up to me and asked if I needed help with anything. I assumed that he worked there, and I said no thanks, I was just looking around. I stayed at the store for a while longer, but I did not end up buying anything. After I left the store, I was walking through the mall to see if I wanted to go to another place. When I was looking around at one point, I saw the man who had approached me in the store. I thought that he had worked there like I said, so this seemed kind of weird to see him in the hallway. He was just sort of standing there. The guy had a very slight beard, was kind of big, and had thinning hair. I turned and kept walking in the direction that I had been going. I went around a corner and didn't see any stores that I wanted to go in there, so I turned around. It just gave me the feeling that he was following me. At that point, whether he was or he wasn't, I decided that I would just leave. I headed for the nearest exit, which was down that walkway and to the right. So I walked over there and then left. And I had walked from school to the mall and would walk home as well, because I lived close to both and did not have a car. So I started to go on the sidewalk along the parking lot. It was then that I heard somebody walking behind me. I turned and saw the same guy as before. Now I knew that he had to be following me for some reason. I walked faster and crossed a busy street, and then was just a few blocks from my neighborhood. The man continued to follow me. The longer he was back there, the more nervous I became. When I started to reach my neighborhood, I just took off running. I sprinted down to the end of the street, then I went around to the street behind ours. I then hopped a fence going into our backyard and quickly went around to the front of the house. Then I got the key that was under the rug on our front step and went inside. I caught my breath and looked around. I didn't see the man anywhere and was pretty confident that I had lost him. For the rest of that day, I didn't see him at all. Well, a couple of days later, I think it was, my friends and I decided to go to the mall again after school. We were just walking around and hanging out like we usually did. I remember though that we were standing around in this one area near the food court. I looked over and happened to notice the same man again. He was sitting alone at a table in the food court, but didn't have any food. He was just sitting there, looking at me. When I saw him, I told my friends about what happened the other day. We decided to walk away from the man. A while later though, I glanced around and noticed the guy walking behind us. He was a ways back, but definitely trailing us. When I noticed that, I told my friends again. Ryan and Jose decided that they wanted to confront him. Emily and I told them not to, but it was too late. We didn't know if the guy was dangerous or something or what would happen, but Ryan and Jose both started walking right towards the guy, and they didn't seem to be afraid of him at all. But before they could reach him, the guy suddenly turned around and literally started speed walking out of there. Emily and I started to walk after them, but they quickly went out of our sight. About 5 minutes later, Ryan and Jose returned. They said that they literally chased the guy out of the mall, and he had left before they were able to catch up with him. So at that point, they turned around and went back. For the rest of the time that we were in the mall, we didn't see him, and I never saw him again after that either.
I went shopping at the mall last year. This was my local mall, not too far from my house. I really liked it because it's big, always updated to feel new, and has basically every store and restaurant you could want. There's even a movie theater attached to it. So, to give some background of my story, I'm a 20-year-old female. I was home for the summer living with my parents. There was actually 2 sales going on at 2 different stores that I shopped at frequently in the mall. I asked a friend if they wanted to go with me, but unfortunately they were busy, so it would just be me going by myself. I would guess that I got to the mall at about 11 a.m. It was pretty busy, and after going to 2 stores and getting a few things, I went inside a shoe store. After getting inside, I was just kind of looking around. I was then approached by an employee. He introduced himself to me and said that his name was David, and if I needed any help with anything, to talk to him. He had brown hair, looked to be in his mid-30s, and was somewhat short. I told him I was good, but he proceeded to tell me about all the deals they had and asked me what I was looking for. After I told him that I was just kind of looking around, he asked me what my style was and things like that. He came across to me as a salesman who wanted badly to get me to buy something, but that soon changed. I flat out told him that I wasn't planning on buying anything there right now. In fact, I had already spent more money than I wanted to for the day. He said, "Got it," and then I thought he would walk away, but instead asked me if I went to school around there. I told him where I went to college and then started to walk towards the exit. David followed me. He asked me why I was leaving so soon, and he said that he wanted to get to know me a little better. This came across to me as creepy. I left that particular store and should have just went home then and there, but I like shopping and I went inside another store to look around nearby. I was inside that store for maybe 20 minutes and then I left. As I was walking back down one of the main hallways of the mall, I saw David again. This time, he was walking down the hallway headed towards me, but on the opposite side, and he wasn't looking at me or anything. I figured that he either had just gotten off of work or was on his break. Either way, I didn't want to see him. I looked away to the opposite direction and tried to walk behind some other people so that he wouldn't notice me. Once I was sure that he had passed me, I looked behind me to make sure. But then, I saw David staring right at me. I looked away quick and picked up my walking pace. Now I was actually going home. I walked down the hallway until I got back to the entrance of the mall that I had came in and then got to my car and left. I drove home and spent the rest of the night hanging out with my family and watching a movie. I went to my bedroom to go to bed at like midnight, but before attempting to fall asleep, I turned off my lights and turned on some Netflix on my TV. This went on for maybe 30 minutes, and it was about 12:30 a.m. when I heard a noise outside my bedroom window. It sounded like a tree branch was scraping against it, but in an unnatural way. I had curtains covering most of my window, but could partially see outside of it. When I glanced over, nothing was there. But just when I had turned my attention back to the TV, I heard a very similar noise again. This time, I saw something go in front of the window. It was just for a second, but I knew something was there. It was very unlikely for it to be an animal, too. I paused the show I was watching and locked my eyes onto the window. There was nothing there for maybe 10 seconds. Then I got up to go close the curtain. When I stood up and had taken about 2 steps over to it, I saw someone come into view. It was David. I jumped back in shock. How and why was he at my bedroom window? When he saw me, he looked surprised and ducked down below the window. I kept looking out of it. I wanted him to leave, and I could tell that he was just ducking below it to get out of my view. He got up after a few seconds and looked in again. Then he knocked on the window. I screamed and yelled as loud as I could that I was calling the police. David stayed at the window and put his hand up to his mouth, making the "be quiet" signal. My parents must have heard me screaming, because my dad then knocked on my bedroom door from the hallway. I opened it, and when he came into the room, he saw David at my window. My dad immediately sprinted out of the room yelling. I got my phone and dialed the police. My dad chased after David, and I heard a loud screeching of tires a short time later. Unfortunately, he had gotten away. My dad came back inside and said that he was maybe within 10 feet of reaching him. It's probably a good thing that he didn't catch him, though, because I don't know how dangerous David was, and it's best for my dad not to try to fight him, even though I'm sure my dad would have won the fight. The police got there a short time later. I was able to tell them all about David, a detailed description including where he worked, and that was enough information for the police. They were able to get David, and I feel much safer now.
This happened back when I was a kid. I was 7 years old at the time, and the year was 2005. It was summertime, and my family and I went on a small vacation to visit my cousins, aunt, and uncle who lived a few states away. I remember that my cousin Matt and I would hang out whenever we were in each other's city because we were around the same age. We also had many of the same interests, so I was excited to hang out with him. When we got there, we went to this huge mall that was right by Matt's house. The mall was so big that there was an amusement park in the middle of it. That's where my family and my cousin's family went, and we got the wristbands so that you could ride all of the rides that they had. We all went around the amusement park and went on several rides. Our parents were hanging out around us, and our sisters were a bit younger. I remember that at one point, Matt and I went off a little ways away from our parents to go on this one ride.
The mall was really busy, and I somehow lost track of Matt. I don't remember exactly how, if I got distracted by something or if it was just too busy. All I know is that I was trying to find him, and I couldn't seem to. I walked around, thinking that I would, and the next thing I knew, I was lost. At some point, when I was wandering around lost, this random guy started following me. I'm not sure exactly when I noticed it, but when I did, I continued to walk around trying to find anybody that I knew, like my parents or my sister. I think I ended up just moving farther away by accident, though. The guy behind me was wearing a black shirt and had glasses and sort of a beard. I don't really remember much else about him, though. Everywhere I went, he seemed a little ways behind me. After probably 10 minutes of wandering around the amusement park, I couldn't take it anymore. I decided to just leave that area and try to get away from the man. I walked out into the large hallways of the shopping mall. I had no idea which way to go when I was there. People were all over the place, everywhere I looked. I walked over to this one area where there were escalators. I went up to the next level, and the man was still behind me. Once I was up there, I just kind of wandered around. I think I went into a store or two, and then back out, but I wasn't able to lose the guy. After walking around on the second level for a while, I didn't think it was working, so I decided to go back down. I went back over to the escalators, and luckily I was able to find them again. When I made it there, I went back down and then into the amusement park again. I looked back and saw the guy still behind me. It's pretty crazy how he followed me for so long. I was so desperate that I decided to go on a random ride. It was like the first one I saw, and I knew the man wouldn't go on it because it was only for kids. I used my wristband to get on, and soon the ride took off. As the ride was going, I was wondering how I was going to find my parents again or get away from this guy. When the ride ended, I couldn't believe my eyes when I saw my parents walking over. I met them after getting off, and they asked me why I had gone on the ride. I told them how a guy was following me and I was trying to get away. When they asked me who, I looked around to point him out, but he was gone. I never saw him for the rest of the day, or again after that. I'm really glad that my parents showed up when they did. I don't know what that man was planning to do.
This took place last year. I went to a mall nearby where I live one night. I had to get a birthday present for my sister's kid. I didn't really know what I could get him, but I figured that the mall would have some options, so I walked around trying to get some ideas. I had asked my sister, and she just said the usual, "It doesn't matter, I'm sure he will like whatever you get him." Her son was 9 years old at the time, and I had already got him my good gift ideas of a Nerf basketball hoop the previous year. 2 years ago, my sister got mad at me for getting him video games because she said he played them too much. Anyways, I tried to remember back to when I was 9 and think of what I would have liked. I ended up getting him more video games because I knew he would like them, and I don't care what my sister says. I'm going to be a cool uncle to this kid. So I was in the mall for maybe 30 minutes or so. When I was done shopping, I left to go out to my car. There was a pretty big parking garage right next to the mall where I had parked in. By now, with it being nighttime, the parking garage was basically empty. I had parked on the second level because usually when I go, it's busy and it's just kind of a habit for me. So I got to my car and then went inside. Before I had a chance to back up and leave though, I saw something really strange. There was what looked like a man running down the parking garage aisle really fast. And I mean like extremely fast. It was pretty much just a blur almost. He went out of my sight and I was left wondering if I really just saw that. Then moments later the man came running back from the other direction once more extremely fast. It was really strange. I thought to myself, did that guy really just run that fast? And then I thought to myself, why is someone running that fast in a mall parking garage? It was certainly strange to say the least. I looked around in the direction that the man had run, and then I saw him. The guy was standing just in front of the wall at the end of the parking garage. He was just standing there, not really doing anything other than looking around. I kept watching him because I was so confused and also curious. Was he going to run some more? Was he practicing or training for something? My eyes were locked onto the guy to see what he would do. I watched him for at least 2 or 3 minutes straight, but he didn't do anything. He just kept standing there. Then I looked away for a second. When I looked back, he was gone. Just like that. It was really strange. After that, I just left. The whole thing just struck me as really odd. Who was that guy, and what was he doing? I later found out through social media that others had seen him too. There were reports of him running through the mall occasionally. He was called the Mall Runner. Some other people had seen him around the mall as well. For a few weeks, I thought that it was just some random guy who liked to run around the mall for some reason. And then I saw him online a couple of weeks after this. It was a social media post from a local news account. It said that a man known as the Mall Runner was wanted for multiple robberies. So apparently he was a criminal as well. He seemed to be a really mysterious and strange guy. I'm glad that he didn't try anything with me when I saw him in the garage that night.
I'm a 20-year-old female who works at a bigger clothing store in a large-sized mall. I've been working there for almost 2 years now, and I enjoy the job. I'm working there during my time in college, and I'm going into my junior year. This is something that took place last year, and nothing like it has happened ever since. It all started on a Friday. I worked that day, and I took the bus to and from work at the time. My apartment is not that far, but not close enough to walk. I have a car now, but didn't when the story takes place. So on this Friday, I was working and maybe 3 hours into my shift. I did a bit of everything from cashier to organizing areas of the store to dealing with returns. At this time, I was working near one of the displays, reorganizing things that had gotten out of order. The store was average as far as busyness goes. There were people all over, but it wasn't overwhelming. I spent maybe 10 minutes in this one spot and happened to catch this one guy staring at me when I was there. It wasn't a big deal, but it happened again less than a minute later. Maybe he thought he recognized me. I certainly didn't recognize him. I kept working, and only a few minutes later, there was a tap on my shoulder from behind. It startled me. I didn't know anybody was behind me. I looked and saw the same guy. He said hi to me, and I said hi. I asked if he needed help finding anything, and the guy just said no, and kept staring at me. I wasn't really sure how to respond. I just said, "Okay, let me know if you need anything." The guy just said, "Okay," and remained there, like 2 feet away from me. He was short, had really short blonde hair, and was sort of heavy set. He was also older than me by probably 20 years at least. I kept working with the guy standing right next to me. I could feel him just staring at me as I did. There was something off about him for sure. I finished work in that area, and then I decided to move to a different spot of the store after that, for obvious reasons. I didn't see the man over there, and a while later, it was time for my break. We had a break room, but on this day in particular, I decided to go into the mall to get some food. I had forgotten to pack anything for myself to eat, and we had a lot of food options in our mall. I left the store and walked towards the food court. It took probably between 5 and 10 minutes to get there because the mall is pretty big. As I was arriving in the food court, I spotted the same man from earlier. He was walking a ways away and looking at me once again. I was really hoping this was just a coincidence. I got in one of the lines to order and noticed the man get in the same line a few people behind me. I ignored it. After I got the food and sat down, the man went to a table a little ways away from mine. However, I caught him staring at me several more times. Also, he didn't have any food, so I guess he didn't order anything. Now, I felt pretty confident that he was following me. I was pretty creeped out by now. I took the food and decided to finish eating in our break room. When I was walking back to our store, I noticed the man walking behind me. I wasn't surprised by this, and I went into the store and headed straight for the break room. Luckily, once I was inside the break room, the guy would not be able to go in. I was able to eat in peace, and when I returned to work, thought I would find the guy inside somewhere, but I didn't. For the rest of my shift, I didn't notice the man inside the store at all. After work, I left and rode the bus home, all without seeing him. It seemed as though he had finally decided to leave me alone. I had to work again the very next day on Saturday. I remember as I was getting ready for work, thinking how nice it would be to not have that creep staring at me all day today. I left my place, rode the bus to work, and then got to the store. It's funny because only like 10 minutes after I started work, I saw the man again. I couldn't believe it at first, but sure enough, he was there. I was working at the registers, ringing people up. The guy was standing on the other side of the store. I didn't catch him staring at me initially, but that didn't take long. About 20 minutes later, he was still there, and I happened to glance up and notice him staring. He was in like the same spot as he had been before. Our store was much busier today with it being a Saturday. It was pretty easy for the man to go unnoticed, but I certainly had noticed him. I tried to just focus on each customer that I was ringing up. I was glad to be working at the checkouts because it didn't really give the man a chance to talk to me unless he was going to buy something. I didn't even bother looking over to see if the man was still there for a while. Hopefully, he would just give up and leave. Unfortunately for me, I was moved to work in a different section of the store a few hours later. We were very busy and I had more organizing to do. Probably 15 minutes into this, the man approached me. I hadn't known that he was even still in the store. He walked up to me just like he had before, and he said hi. I said hi back to him, and I wanted to ask him why he was following me all around, but I decided not to. I tried to keep it professional, and I just asked him what I could help him with. He told me he liked the dress that I was wearing, and after the man said that, he just kind of walked away. I just said thanks, and I was surprised to see him leave. And even though it was still really awkward, it was more normal than the previous day's confrontation. Still, I found him staring at me from a distance a short time later. When it was time for my break, only a short time after this, I stayed in the break room the whole time. When I left, I once again did not notice the man for the rest of my shift. I was happy about this, but I knew that didn't mean he wouldn't show up next time that I worked. The good news for me was that I did not work the next day. In fact, I didn't work for almost a week, so maybe the guy would show up, see I wasn't working, and then finally give up. Anyways, I left work, walked through the mall, and did some small shopping of my own. After that, I left the mall to catch a bus home. Once I got on, I sat down like always. I put on my headphones and went on my phone. But shortly after we started moving, I noticed that the man was on the bus with me. Now this was very concerning. I had never seen this guy on the bus with me before, and I knew that for a fact. It appeared that he was now following me home. I wanted to disappear, and I really didn't know what to do. But when we came to my stop a few minutes later, I got up and left, hoping that the man would not do the same. But he did. I had a few blocks to walk to get to my apartment, and I tried to go as quickly as I could. I had some distance on the guy, and he didn't seem like he was trying to walk extra fast or anything like that. Then, to my surprise, the guy turned a corner and away from me. Was he not following me? I felt incredibly relieved to see this. I still walked quickly to my place and got inside. After getting inside, I didn't even get a chance to do anything before seeing the man walking out in front of my place. He was on the sidewalk, and it looked like he was just walking past. But then he turned and headed up towards my building. I saw him standing outside of the entrance. I was hoping that nobody would let him in. My apartment building only had 8 units, and mine was on the 2nd level. Then the guy looked up at my window. I quickly ducked down, but I was sure that he saw me. I remained ducking down, just hoping that the man would walk away. Several minutes went by. I then decided to check out the window again to see if the man was finally gone, and when I looked, he was. But just as I was starting to feel better, I heard my doorknob turn. Somebody must have let the man into my building, and now he was right outside my door. Instantly, I was extremely worried again. The guy had just tried to walk in. The door was locked, and the guy then knocked on the door. I yelled at him to leave, or I was calling the police. I figured that he clearly knew I was inside here. Things then got quiet. I didn't hear him walking away though, so I didn't really think that he had left. I quietly walked over to my door and looked through the peephole. The man was still there, right on the other side. I quietly walked away from him and took out my phone. Then I called the police. As I waited for them to arrive, I went to my bedroom where I felt it was safer. I didn't bother to even try and listen to see if the man would try to break into my unit or if he would leave. When the police got there, the man was still right outside of my door. They talked to him and he ended up leaving finally. After that, I never saw the man again.
At one point, I worked at a mall as a maintenance worker. This is the craziest thing that ever happened in that time. The mall that I worked at was pretty large and had lots of walkways. Tons of people would also go there every day. So most of the time, I was kept pretty busy. I would do all sorts of stuff and really whatever was needed. So one night, I found myself working near one end of the mall. It had gotten to be pretty quiet now because the mall was only open for another 30 minutes or so. I was in a sort of open area near the escalators where you could see the other levels of the mall, and this mall had 3 levels. There were some water fountains and benches in the area that I was. I was mopping the floor in that particular section, and I didn't see any other customers at all in that time. So, in the middle of mopping, all of a sudden, I saw a water bottle hit the ground right in front of me. I was very confused at first. I looked around and then realized that somebody must have dropped it from one of the levels above. When I looked, I didn't see anybody. That was strange. I picked up the empty water bottle and put it in the trash, then continued my work. However, just about a minute later, I heard something whizzing towards me from above, but before I could react, I heard whatever it was hit the ground right behind me. I looked over and saw an empty drink cup laying on the floor. I looked up again immediately, but saw no one. I realized though that somebody was intentionally tossing things down here towards me. They were probably even trying to hit me. Obviously, this was not cool. I shouted, asking who did that, but got no answer. I went over to the escalator then and went upstairs to the 2nd level to see who it could be. I looked around but didn't see anyone, so then I went up to the 3rd level, but when I got there, I didn't see anyone. Whoever had done it must have run away. I figured that it was some teenager messing around and thinking that it was funny. I just hoped that they wouldn't do it again. So then I went back down and continued my work. I mopped the floors unbothered for the next 2 or 3 minutes or so. Then, suddenly, I heard the sound of something headed towards me again. Once more, I had no time to react, because it all happened so quick. All of a sudden, I felt my back getting hit by something. This one was pretty hard. I looked and saw another water bottle on the ground. This one was almost completely full though, which is why it hurt. I was really angry now. I ran for the escalator and then ran up it. I went up to the 3rd floor and this time finally saw who was doing it. Standing right in the center of the walkway, about 50 feet away from me, was a man wearing a really creepy clown mask. He stood there just facing me, and nobody else was around at all. I yelled at him, asking him what on earth he was doing throwing things at me. He didn't say anything or even move. I started angrily walking towards him. I was just planning on giving him more of a piece of my mind. However, when I started to approach, he slowly lifted his hand towards me, revealing that he had brass knuckles. I realized that this guy did not seem like somebody who I wanted to mess with. In fact, he seemed like he could possibly be a bit of a loose cannon. So I just turned and walked away, going back down the escalator. Luckily, he did not follow me. I didn't return to mopping, but walked out of the man's sight from the 3rd level. Then I called mall security as well as the police. I notified them both of what was going on, and then stayed away from the area where the guy had tossed the stuff at me. Security arrived a short time later. Unfortunately, the man was gone. I'm not sure if he just went into a bathroom and took his mask off or if he left the mall entirely, but he was not located. After that, I thankfully did not have any more incidents like that in my time working there, but that was by far the craziest thing. At one point in time, I used to work at a clothing store in a mall. It was a smaller store and not that big, but I liked working there. The mall was nice and I lived pretty close by. The events I'm going to tell you about took place one time when I was working alone. The store stayed quiet for much of the day. We got a few shoppers here and there, but there was a good amount of time where I was by myself. I remember at one point a man coming into the store and looking around for quite a while. However, he did not buy anything and he eventually left. That was sometime in the afternoon. Hours went by and we got a few more people here and there. Eventually, it was closing time and it was my job to close the doors, lock them, and do some other things before leaving. I had closed many times before and I had a routine that I would do. Nobody was in the store, so when I closed, I locked the doors and then I started cleaning a little bit inside. I was not going to be there for too long, but just a few minutes. In the time that I was cleaning, I heard someone trying to open the doors. The doors to the store were glass and completely clear, so you could see right through them. When I looked over, I saw a man there. It was the same guy who had walked around the store for a while earlier but didn't buy anything. I took a few steps over to the door and said that we were closed. The man did not say anything back to me, but he tried opening the doors yet again. After telling him loudly again that we were closed, I started to go back to what I was doing. When I did, I happened to notice that the man was now finally walking away. So I figured that he was gone for good after that. As I kept working though, a few minutes went by. Then, out of nowhere, I heard this really loud noise. It came from the front end of the store. Then, I heard another loud noise. I looked over and I saw the same man hitting the glass of the door with something. Within its third or fourth hit, the glass started to break. I was really surprised at what was happening, obviously. And at that point, I knew that I needed to get out of there. But those were the only doors. So instead, I headed to the back of the store where we had a very small back room area. I went inside of it and quickly shut the door and locked it behind me. Meanwhile, as I did this, I heard more glass breaking, and the man was soon able to get inside of the store. I really had no idea why he was doing this, but I knew that I had to call the police, so I took out my cell phone and dialed 911. I asked for police and told them what was happening. I stayed there in the back room, trying to otherwise be quiet. I did feel relatively safe back there, until several minutes after I had been in the back room, I heard the man trying to open the door. Then, he loudly banged on it several times. After that, he seemed to walk elsewhere in the store. The man was inside of the store for what felt like forever. Soon, though, things became quiet. I couldn't really tell at first where the man was because I couldn't hear everything that well anyways. But after a while longer, I still didn't hear anything. The next thing that I heard in the store was the police. I came out and talked to them. Apparently, the guy had left. I saw that the store was messed up and broken glass was everywhere near the front. The man ended up being tracked down though on the other side of the mall. I really don't know why he did it. I think he might have been on drugs or something. I'm really glad that we had a back room at the store though and that I was able to go in it. I have a really crazy experience that happened a few years ago on Black Friday. I'm a female and in my mid-20s. At this particular time, I went with my best friend Stephanie to go Black Friday shopping. We live not too far away from a really large mall, and on Black Friday, it's a fun place to be. Sure, there are quite a few other people shopping there as well, but that doesn't bother me. We also have a friend named Jack who we went to school with, and he was working at one of the stores in the mall, so Stephanie and I wanted to say hi to him at some point. We arrived at the mall early in the morning and started shopping. As you would guess, it was very crowded. We got a few things, and then we went to the store that Jack was working at and said hi to him. And his store was also very busy like the rest of them. After leaving the store, we were making our way towards the other end of the mall when I got a text message. I remember that I took out my phone and I saw that it was from a number I did not recognize. The text was telling me to come back to the store. I realized that this had to be Jack, except I already had his number in my phone. He was in my contacts, and I had him under his name, so I didn't know why this would show up as just a number and not Jack. I asked who it was by texting just to be sure. He texted back saying Jack. I showed the text to Stephanie, and we then went back to Jack's store to see him. After arriving there, he said hi again, and that he was surprised to see us so soon. I told him how he had texted me, and he said that he did not text me. I showed him the text, and he said it wasn't him. He even showed me his phone, and he had not in fact texted me, and that was also not in fact his number. It was really strange. I looked around, wondering if somebody else in the store was behind the text messages. It was packed in there. I had really no way of knowing who it could have been. After that, Stephanie and I left the store once again, and we walked back out to where we had been going before the text. A while later, we went to the food court and were sitting at a table and eating. It was very busy there as well. When we were there though, I got another text on the phone from the same number. I looked at it, and this time the text said that I looked cute. I was creeped out, and I looked around again. However, anybody could have been sending these texts. There were hundreds of people within my sight. Stephanie and I were not really sure what to do. I texted the number back asking who it was, but they did not answer me. Instead, about 5 minutes later, while we were still sitting there, they sent another text. This one was a picture though. I looked at it, and it was of me, taken probably just seconds prior, and it was really zoomed in. I looked at it for a while, and then I looked around for the direction that the photo was taken from. After scanning around the food court, I finally saw it. There was a man standing pretty far away from us near the edge of the food court to my left, and he was just staring at me. He had this creepy grin on his face, and when Stephanie saw him, she was also creeped out. We decided to just get up and leave the mall. After standing though, I saw the man start to walk in our direction. He was still a long ways away though. We both got to moving, and we walked very quickly to the opposite way where the man was. There was enough people around that we were pretty much able to get a good distance away from him. We quickly took an escalator down to the lower level, and then we found the way to the parking garage that we had parked in. I kept looking back over my shoulder, but I never saw the guy. We were able to leave and get home after that, and I blocked the guy's number as well. I'm not sure how he got my number in the first place. I haven't seen him since though. We reported him to the mall, and hopefully he was either found and banned or will not do anything like that again.
I've explored many abandoned buildings over the past 2 years, but the scariest was an abandoned mall I explored once with a friend. It was late at night, and it took some work to get into the shopping center as it was locked up tight. We had to get onto the roof of the mall by going through a multi-story parking ramp that was next to it, also abandoned. There was a 10-foot wall we found and piled random things and debris against the wall so that we could climb over. Once we were in the mall, we did some normal exploration, checking everything out. We had explored almost the entire mall when we went downstairs to the ground floor for the last parts of it. As we walked around, we heard the sound of a radio and saw a light coming from an office. We thought it might be security, so we walked back up to where we had come in on the roof, ready to leave. As we were walking onto the roof, my friend suddenly stopped in our tracks and said that there was a guy blocking our exit up ahead. This guy was wearing all black and had no security badge on, and he hadn't seen us yet. We decided to hide for a bit, waiting for him to leave, thinking he was another explorer just smoking a cigarette or something. However, when we'd come back from our hiding spot a bit later, thinking he was gone by then, he was still there, this time holding a metal pipe. We instantly knew that something was going on here, since he looked at us as if he was guarding the entrance. It seemed like gang activity, and that they might be doing something or maybe hiding something in the building down on the first floor that they didn't want anyone to see. We went back down to the second floor and hid in a display window that was hidden from the rest of the floor. We were there for like 20 minutes at most, but it felt like years, heart pounding the whole time. We heard another man walking around our floor, dragging a piece of metal across the floor. My friend and I had no idea if maybe somebody had seen us walking around, or if they knew that we were in the building. But we didn't want to take any chances since these men looked sketchy. My friend remembered that there was another door on the roof that would bypass the guy guarding the other route and would take us straight into the parking ramp. We decided this was the best plan to get out without anybody noticing. We waited for the guy to leave our floor and decided to make a break for it to find the door. We couldn't rush or run as it would be easy to hear somebody running around in the abandoned mall, so we quietly sneaked around the back rooms until reaching the other door. We found our escape, but it was blocked by debris. We took a risk with the noise at this point and started pulling the debris away from the door, and my friend kicked the door open loudly. We sprinted across the roof, and I have no idea if anyone saw us because I was occupied in getting out there fast. We finally got into the parking ramp and made our way down to the bottom. There we saw there was another presumably gang member sitting in a blacked out Ford Transit van. The engine of the car was on, and I'm guessing the guy was in charge of guarding the entrance to the abandoned parking ramp. Whoever these people were, they clearly did not want anyone entering the abandoned mall. Maybe we just got caught in the mall at the wrong time, but we still weren't going to take any chances. At this point, our only option was to find a fire exit to the outside. The fire exit we found was screwed shut, so I basically launched myself through the door, which luckily flew open, and we got out and climbed down to the main road and onto the street. The only thing I can think of being all coordinated as the guys were and how they were dressed was gang activity. Once again, we had no idea if they originally knew that we were in the mall or not. Probably not, but we didn't want to take any chances with them, especially if they thought we saw something. That day has stuck with me as a scary moment in my life. I'm still exploring, but just being more careful with places I choose to explore. I worked in retail, I would sometimes get used to seeing the same people shopping in the store. There would be so many regulars who would come in and buy the same item every week or whatever. In my years of working at a clothing store in a mall called Westbrook, I've seen many people multiple times. But there was one customer named Mark who ended up giving me so much trouble that I had to quit. A few years ago, I was working at the store in the mall, and I met this skinny man named Mark. At first, he seemed very innocent. I remember meeting him for the first time.
He was nice and charming, looked to be in about his mid-40s, and was always nicely dressed. I was working at the counter helping a customer when he came by after looking at the front racks of the store and said hello. He asked for advice for a gift for his niece. After a few minutes of chatting about styles and sizes, he eventually left with a small piece of clothing. For the next few weeks he came by once, maybe twice a week. Each time he would say hello again with the same smile and chat for a bit before finding more clothes for his niece, usually just one item. He'd make jokes about how crazy it was that his niece wanted so much clothing after the first one, but it was odd because he would only buy one thing for her at a time. I didn't look into it much though, because I'm the type of person to mind my own business. But weeks after this kept going on, everything started to get weird. Mark began visiting more frequently, to the point where I'd see him almost every day. Sometimes he'd shop in the morning and sometimes in the afternoon. It was starting to creep me out because he would show up, chit-chat for a bit, and then leave without even buying anything. I asked about his niece multiple times, and he would respond as if they had all of a sudden stopped talking. One day I saw him walk outside the store without coming in, and then he passed by again and again. I caught him glancing in each time, his eyes looking at the store as if he were searching for someone without anybody noticing. That same day, he walked in straight to me. He made a bit of small talk because I was always super busy, and then he left again. This time, I knew something was off. I tried telling my coworkers, and they said if it happened again to let them know. I contacted my nephew, who is a cop, but he said without any certain threat, there wasn't much he could do about it, but to keep him updated. Everything was fine for a few days because I stopped seeing him. Then, one evening, I was closing up and I saw him outside the store, pretending to look at the display windows. It was odd because he had already seen the display windows for the past month. I hid behind the counter and my heart started racing. My coworker just looked at me and laughed at first. I tried to explain exactly how it made me feel, but she didn't think it was a big deal and just walked away laughing. Eventually, though, Mark walked away and I was able to go home a while later. The following week, Mark started showing up even on my off days. My coworkers told me that he would come in, look around, ask for me, and then leave when he found out I wasn't there. I started feeling super uncomfortable and was always paranoid, constantly looking everywhere to see if Mark was around. I think my coworkers were then realizing that this might be an actual problem. He wasn't technically breaking the law though, like my nephew said, so I didn't know what to do. But that same night, I ended up closing again. Now, the clothing store I worked at was connected to the walkways of the mall, but also had a door that opened out to the parking lot. After I locked the doors and everything, I was about to walk out into the parking lot and leave. There weren't very many cars left at all. However, I noticed a car parked just a few spaces away from mine. Inside, I could see one light, and I realized that Mark was inside the car, staring straight at me. I froze. Then I started to freak out, trying to process what I had seen. My hands were shaking, and I called for my coworker Jake, who was also closing with me. I told him everything that happened. I quickly turned around and asked if he could give me a ride home, and Jake said yes. We then left and walked to Jake's car, and I saw Mark still in his car, staring at us. But here's the weird part. After that night, when Mark saw me leave with Jake, he never showed up again. I haven't seen him in years, and none of my coworkers have mentioned seeing him either. I don't know what he's out there doing, but I'm certain that he must have assumed that I was with Jake and then fled.
Two years ago, I went Christmas shopping at the mall with my wife. We went to this really big mall that has basically every store inside of it. We had a lot of shopping to do to buy presents for everybody in our families, including each other. After getting to the mall, we did lots of shopping for people in the family. It took hours to find all the stuff. We had our hands full with bags, so we went out to the car in the parking garage. Then we went back inside the mall after unloading. By now, it was nighttime and we were almost done shopping, but my wife and I decided to momentarily split up to try to find some gifts for each other. With how large this mall was, I figured this would be pretty easy to do. So I went to a couple of stores and I found something for her that she would really like, but I was trying to find something else as well. During this time, I remember that I was walking in the mall, and randomly this woman came up to me. She literally came up from behind me and tapped me on the shoulder. I did not know who she was. The woman then told me that my wife was looking for me and her phone was dead. She went on to say that my wife was downstairs outside by the north exit and wanted to meet me there. It just seemed really weird to me. I guess my wife must have asked this woman to tell me that. The woman then walked away before I could really say anything. I didn't know why my wife would be there though.
I started to go to the escalator to go downstairs, trying to make sense of this whole situation. When I was on my way down though, I decided to try calling my wife. When I did, she didn't answer her phone. This made me start to believe the woman, so I started walking for the north exit. This exit was by far the quietest one and was rarely used anymore. That's because there was no parking lot there, it was just a sidewalk. Then there was a grass area with some trees and another building of a restaurant that was connected to the mall. There had used to be a parking lot there, but when the restaurant was built, it took the place of it. I walked over to the doors and then opened them. I looked outside and I did not see my wife. It was really dark out there now with little to no lighting, just a dim street light a ways down and then light coming from the restaurant. I stepped outside fully and looked around. I still didn't see anything. But just at that point, I felt my phone vibrating in my pocket. I took it out to see that my wife was calling me. I answered and asked her where she was. She told me that she was in the mall by the food court kind of. At that point, I quickly walked right back inside of the mall myself. My wife went on to say that she hadn't noticed that I called her, so she was calling me back. I told her about the strange woman. We were both pretty much done shopping for the most part, so we met up by the food court and then went to the car and went home. I'm still really confused about the whole thing. Was I being set up to get robbed or something? I really don't know. I don't know who the woman was or how she knew my wife and I. I'm really glad that my wife called me when she did though, or I don't know what would have happened.
In 2019, when I was 15 years old, at least once a month, I went to a town close to mine to go to the dentist. It was always me, my father, and his girlfriend, until one day, while we were returning to our city, we stopped at a pretty big mall that was a few kilometers away. After entering, we ate and spent about 1 hour walking around and seeing stores until we decided that it was time to leave. When we got to the ground floor, we noticed that it was already dark and the mall was pretty empty, until suddenly I saw out of the corner of my eye that two men had come down the escalator with us. As we were walking towards the exit, I realized that the men were having some kind of conversation that sounded meaningless and inaudible. It was as if they made something up at the time, and after we left the mall, we started walking towards our car. The parking lot was empty due to the time, and our car was quite far away. I realized that the two men were looking at us, and then looking towards our car as if to see where we were going. With every passing second, I felt a little bit more scared, until finally we reached our vehicle. But a few seconds before we arrived, I watched the men get into a white 2019 Chevrolet Onix that was parked right behind our car. And a few seconds after getting in, the men didn't start the car or make any move. My dad noticed that. After we got into our car, my dad said to wait a bit. Everything was in a very awkward silence until my dad said to go back. Then we left the car and went back to the mall, while the white Onix lit up its headlights and then drove towards us. I noticed that even after we entered the mall, the white Onix sat in front of the entrance and the men were looking at us from inside the car until about 10 seconds. Then they accelerated and drove away. As we hadn't written down the license plate, the police couldn't do anything, so we didn't even file a complaint with the police station. The next day, my father told what happened to a coworker who used to visit that mall. The coworker said that 1 week before, a man had been kidnapped and killed nearby, and a witness gave a description of the same car with two men. I don't believe the two men were ever caught, and I think they may still be on the loose.
Last year, I went shopping at this old decrepit mall. It was a mall that I had gone to a few times many years ago, when it was in a bit better shape, but I don't live in that area anymore. One day though, I was picking up a friend, but arrived way too early. I found myself on that side of town with almost an hour to kill, and I realized that the mall was still there. I was curious, and decided to go in and see what they had. I hadn't been inside this mall in probably at least 10 years. It was nighttime, but the mall was still supposed to be open. So I parked my car in the nearly empty parking lot and went inside. When I got in, I was shocked that the mall was still even open at all. It was very old, run down, and outdated. There were a few stores here and there that were open, but there were no well-known chains or anything. It was just like stores that I had never heard of. The lighting in the mall was dim, with several light bulbs clearly burnt out, and the farther that I walked into the mall, the worse it got. The food court didn't have any open restaurants anymore. There used to be about 10, and all the places were just vacant. It was sad to see, but I know that sometimes this happens with malls. So I went through basically the whole place. I didn't go into any stores though, and when I reached the other side of the mall, I figured that I would just go back and leave. There was really no other people walking around or even inside the mall that I noticed. So as I walked back, I was still kind of just exploring a little. I walked past one of the really quiet hallways to my right. This one was a dead end. I wasn't planning to go down that way, but as I was approaching, I suddenly heard this loud crashing sound coming from down that hallway. I kept walking, and when I got there, I looked around the corner. I didn't really notice anything strange though. I wasn't sure exactly what the noise was from. I was stopped there looking around for maybe 10 seconds, then I kept going. Not long after I started to walk away though, I heard footsteps from the hallway. When they reached the one that I was in, I glanced over my shoulder. I saw this woman looking at me and walking in my direction. I didn't think much of it, and I turned back and kept going. But as I walked, I heard the woman's footsteps getting closer and closer to mine. She was walking really fast for some reason, and I wasn't quite sure as to why. I kept going though, until she had almost reached me. Then I slowed down and went to the side a little to let her pass. She did not pass me though, and remained behind me. At that point, I turned around and looked at her. Unprovoked, the woman then kicked me in my shins really hard. It obviously hurt, and before I could do anything, she just started running away. I had no idea what on earth was wrong with her. I decided to just get out of that decrepit mall, and I quickly left. I walked out through the parking lot into my car. After getting inside, I looked around, and I noticed the woman was now leaving the mall and walking in my direction rather quickly. I left as fast as I possibly could, not wanting to let her get to me another time. I have no idea what her problem was. That whole mall was really weird. I haven't been back there since.